We are live. It is Monday, August 3rd. Welcome to the month of August. July flew by, even though it was a little bit volatile, a little bit of turbulence on that flight. You know what I mean? I just thought of that analogy. I swear I did not plan that out, but that's what happens when you do what I do. You think of this stuff on the spot. Nonetheless, July was a bit crazy. We're here into August. We had a ton of stuff happen over the weekend. The reason why oil is down right now, which it is down precipitously, about 7% decline on oil. Amazon is still pumping indeed. And yes, I need to shave. I did not go to the barber over the weekend, which is why my beard looks like it's coming back, but I will be shaving pretty soon. Crude right there, 78.99, down about 6.7%. This is really good. It's not really helping all the semiconductor stocks in the pre-market because we've got a variety of other different headlines going on, especially Kospi took a ugly hit last night, 6%. I'm not sure why Kospi fell. That was a bit confusing. Samsung and SK Hynix had massive days on Thursday, and then they opened yesterday, and Kospi takes about a 7% hit or 5% hit. But we do have oil coming down dramatically, and the reason it's down we'll talk about, but obviously Trump said some stuff that was going to delay the attack that was supposed to be a egregious attack. If you were with me Friday on the market close, Axios reporting that the White House was planning one of the largest attacks they've ever had in the history of, Trump said since World War II. Axios was saying in the span of the past 6 months of the conflict, that attack did not happen. And because that attack did not happen, you saw oil come down. S&P 500 is up in the pre-market. Again, July somehow ended green. We actually ended for the past 12 years in a row now green in the month of July. It was 0.03%. So it was a very tiny amount of green, but nonetheless, we did hold that green. August tends to not be that fun when it comes to the markets as well. July actually is okay. Now, again, July high beta momentum over the past 5 years has been horrible, but the S&P itself ends up being green. And that is what we got in 2026. So we will have a lot to get into when it comes into the month of August and seeing what happens and how equities ultimately are priced. And on top of that, we got a bunch of earnings today. We have an obvious big one, Mr. Palantir. After the bell, I will be live at 3:30 with Arnie and Amir. So we will be talking about that. I'll do a little bit of a preview before we get into the earnings themselves. I mean, there's a world which, if you run the numbers, in the most bullish, optimistic scenario, you get $2 billion of revenue, which is above the expectations of $1.8 billion. I'm not expecting $2 billion. I don't think they're actually going to come in with $2 billion this quarter, next quarter, definitely. But if they were, and you're seeing a little bit of a SaaS rotation in the pre-market, not an actual rotation, but an intraday level of money going back to SaaS versus software, which is what we're seeing to start off the day. ServiceNow, Adobe, Palantir, all those are up in the pre-market. Palantir right there up 2.84%. Maybe it's one of the best days for Palantir to report. Also, you're seeing the hyperscalers come back. Look at Microsoft back in the 470s. This was stuck below 400 for the longest amount of time this year. Google back to 362. There's no way Amazon can get a 17% bump if Google doesn't get it as well. So that means the Google sell-off after earnings was fake. It just wasn't real. The market sold it off, but the market sold it off for stupid reasons. And as a result of Amazon and the communication around their CapEx being more seen as meaningful, diligent, and actually responsible, Amazon right there up 2%. I think you're seeing some money come back to the hyperscalers. Even Meta, which fell to 518 on Wednesday, is now almost at 570, still well below its 680 range that it was at 2 weeks ago. But nice to see at least some of that momentum coming back. However, the semis are down, and we'll talk about why the semis are down. I have some theories on it, but the semis went up a lot this year, and it seems like now every time they make a new level, they get rejected. And there's, I think, a couple of reasons for why, but at its core, the market is not necessarily giving the love back to the semis even after the Leopold blow up. And so we'll talk about what it takes to potentially get them back there. Reddit, which hit 135 on Friday on a 20% drawdown, now back at 142 right here, up about 1.48% in the pre-market. All right, let's get into it. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Triple V, thank you for the $200 super chat. Appreciate it. Thank you for being part of the show. It's not helping the allegations of you being my sugar daddy, but I appreciate the $200 super chat. Triple V has a big position in Amazon, and he actually got rid of most of his covered calls on Amazon the day of earnings. He called me like 30 minutes before earnings. He was like, "What do you think?" I was like, "Well, if they announce Google like CapEx, maybe they fall, but if they actually explain their CapEx, maybe they rally." So he took off a decent chunk of those covered calls that he was up on, and now those shares are uncovered. So Amazon really helps a lot of people. By the way, that Chris Camillo segment, I mean, I get how it went viral, but boy, did it go viral. I posted the clip on X and it had about 1.2 million views. And our boy Chris got dunked on from everybody. There was like 5% of people in the comments and in the quote tweets that actually like respected what he did. And 95% of people were like, this is gambling, this is irresponsible, yada, yada. And look, I get it. If you do something like that, which is bi-weekly calls expiring after your account's down 40% and you've been margin called multiple times on an earnings play, a lot of people will think it's degenerate and a lot of people won't think that's responsible. My take on this is very simple. Like, different people have different risk tolerance. And if you know anything about Chris Camillo, that him being down on a weekly option based on a thesis he had on a trade that he thinks is going to work out has happened like a billion times. If you listen to Dumb Money, he's done this successfully a bunch of times and he's lost money a bunch of times. So to me, this is classic Chris, right? This is who he is. This is how he's not buy and hold and DCA for the next 10 years. Like he is, I see a thesis. I think I'm right. I'm going to apply a lot of leverage, a lot of margin, a lot of optionality, literally and metaphorically, to being able to capitalize on that thesis. It's something I did the same to an extent with Robinhood back in 2024. I just didn't have like weekly calls. I had yearly calls. But the point is, that's how some people invest. And, it's not for everyone. It's definitely something that you have to be up your risk tolerance. The other big thing I think people are missing that we're dunking on Chris is like, he's not managing other people's money. He's managing his money. So when you're managing your own money and you lose your own money, by the way, Chris has done very well in life. So if he lost, 50% of his liquid net worth, he has a lot of other assets outside of just his portfolio, right? So it's one of those things where you've accumulated enough wealth where if you're willing to take that type of risk, then you can do it. But if you're managing other people's money like Leopold was doing, you can't margin up on 45 billion. Like, I still can't believe the dude was valedictorian of Columbia at 19. Just an unbelievable. That means he went to college at 15. And even he couldn't recognize that, like, if SanDisk is down 20% and I'm up 1,000% on it and on leverage, maybe I should like take a little, maybe it's not going to go back up 20% the next month. Maybe it actually will fall 50%. Maybe the tides are turning. Maybe the markets don't just go up in a line because of my imagination around where AGI is going. And, even he ended up getting hit. So it's one of those things when you're managing other people's money, there's just a different burden versus managing your own. But obviously everyone has their own risk tolerance. All right, so let's get into it. Thank you all for being here. Let's start off with Trump over the weekend. So the reason oil is down is because Trump came out last night and he once again did what he needed to do in terms of relaxing the markets on what's happening with oil. It's a bunch of different clips. Let's play this right here. I hope this is actually real. If you look at that 10-year, I think it has to be real because if we were to attack, that 10-year would be hitting 5%, which we cannot have. So I think the credit markets finally got Trump to hopefully and more seriously get ready to make a deal.
Asked by Saudi Arabia, UAE, by Qatar, and by Iran. We were all set to go just about at this time right now, and it would have been a massive attack. We were all set to go, but when the allies asked to call it off, you got to sort of say, well, let's see. And the reason they asked is I think there's a deal. There's a deal on Hormuz, and then there will be a deal on the nuclear, or you might call it the denuclearization of Iran. I call it the denuclearization of Iran. So we're holding it. We'll just see. We can do it anytime we want. But we're asked by the three primary groups. We're also asked by Iran, very strongly, actually. They said, we'd like to make a deal. Now, I don't know what they say because a lot of times they'll say that to me and then they'll go out and say, we don't know what he's talking about. Obviously, they don't want to be attacked. And they knew the extent of the attack because they saw it forming. Now what we're doing is we're talking to them in the form of a negotiation. It begins tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see if it's true. I'd love to do that, save a lot of lives, save a lot of unnecessary power, to be honest with you. It'll take many, many years to ever build it back. If it could, I don't think it would be even buildable back. So we had an attack that would be the biggest attack since World War II, and it would have been disastrous for them. And they didn't want us to do it. And frankly, Saudi Arabia didn't want it either. They thought that a deal is imminent. And the deal is imminent, having to do with the Hormuz Strait. And also ultimately the denuclearization of it.
So Trump there says the attack would have been the worst since World War II. And he got the call from the Saudis and the Middle Eastern allies. I mean, again, this is a story that we've heard many, many, many times. Last night, futures pumped on this news. The semis are down right here, but a lot of stocks are up. Potentially based on the idea that Trump is not going to have the largest attack since World War II. I think Trump also understands he does not have the political capital to have that type of attack because the majority of the world does not really agree with this war. And so, you know, if he would have got a lot of pushback, if it would have hurt the ammunitions that they have in terms of the supply, then maybe negotiating a deal would make more sense.
Does Iran have a deadline to come to an agreement?
No, we'll just see how it is. We're ready to go anytime we want. Would I rather make a deal? I'm not looking to kill people because people die. A lot of people die, and we don't want that. So they asked us, Iran specifically, but the other three said I asked Saudi Arabia, the king. I said, the crown prince. I said, what would you rather do? Would you rather have us do this or not? They said, we would much prefer a deal as opposed to an attack because you don't know where these attacks lead. I mean, will they be flooded with people pouring into their country and disaster? A lot of bad things can happen.
Now, as you can see, Trump's being pretty rational there about why he wouldn't want to attack and all of the different cascading circumstances that could be or consequences that could be the result of an attack, which you would expect from the leader of the free world to be like, yeah, before I press this button, maybe I should really think hard about the implications of what would happen before I do this. Now, the reason this is so weird is because for the past week, Trump's been saying, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. In fact, the exact quote was, I will bomb the effing shit out of them. So the sort of switch up here is not unusual because we know Trump is flip-flops and switches his words on a dime. But it's one of those things where after you just heard the past 3 minutes of him talking about why it would be not responsible to do it and they would rather get a deal, negotiate, yada, yada, like what, next week he's going to be back to saying, I'm going to bomb the effing shit out of them. It's one of those things that it's like, maybe this is the final moment of capitulation. And obviously the oil market is reflecting that right now to an extent, right? Down 7% is a pretty aggressive move right here. You did have a lot of put flows on XLE last week. So that is starting to be recognized here, where Trump effectively says, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, we have to get some type of a deal. The 10-year is only slightly down below 4.7. This thing was pushing 4.75 on Friday after hours. And like, you just can't have that happen. You cannot have the 10-year treasury giving you almost a 5% yield. There's just a lot of weird things that happen in the foreign currency exchange market, in the stock market, in the credit markets. The overall desire for bonds, especially from corporate bonds, start to, feel a little bit of pressure when you can get a risk-free rate of return of almost 5%. So it's one of those things where you've got a lot of different cascading issues here, but the number one thing that matters is those treasury yields in the credit markets. And I think enough became enough to the point where Trump finally decided we're going to have to get a deal. Now, does that mean in August we actually get a deal or a framework for a deal or a ceasefire? I think the first thing we need is a ceasefire. That usually precedes an actual deal. So we would get the MOU to come back. I don't know what it would take to get that to come back, but like, we're going to need to have something. Now, the Iranians over the weekend, they came out and they said, yeah, we're not talking to the United States. So it's a little weird because you got oil reflecting that there is some type of conversation that's happening. And then you have Iran reporting via their state media agency that we are not talking to the US. Now, maybe they're just trying to say this to be able to sound smart, although in the background they are talking to the United States. Iran also said the Strait of Hormuz remains closed to any ship that does not coordinate with the IRGC. So I would imagine they're just saying this to say this, but they actually are talking because they actually do want some type of deal. Hopefully, we can get that type of deal. But if we don't, then once again, it goes back to the same ping pong nature of geopolitical policy that ultimately affects stock prices. Having said that, the month of August in general is a bit of a choppy month. And so as we enter into August, I think we have to have that as the backdrop that maybe Trump tries to avoid the choppiness of August, at least in the credit markets, if not the stock markets, by giving some relief to the Fed. There was also a note on Friday on the market close that Kevin Warsh, the New York Times, reported he's thinking of lowering the amount of Fed meetings per year. So there's usually, for the past 5 decades, there's been 8 meetings per year. And Kevin Warsh is thinking of cutting that down to about 4 or 6, which I don't think would be the craziest thing in the world because I don't think anything good happens in those meetings. And I don't think, those meetings say anything that's meaningful, especially if Kevin Warsh is not even giving guidance. By the way, Strategy sold about 1,600 Bitcoin over the past week. They raised some more money this morning. So you got BTC that still has not been able to necessarily benefit from a little bit more risk on appetite. But if Kevin Warsh were to delay some of the meetings and, buy himself some more time for this Iran war to end, so the next time he gets onto the podium, you actually don't have 25% of the Fed members that want to hike, because at this point, if nothing changes with oil or the broader inflation dynamic, which PCE data on Thursday was good, it wasn't great, but it was like at least somewhat decent, you're going to have a rate hike. Like, you're just going to have 50 to 75% of the Fed wanting a rate hike. And at that point, once it gets to a majority, Kevin Warsh is not going to be able to hold out. S&P 500 right there, 751 in the pre-market. So again, as I said last week, I think there's two scenarios that we can get. Number one is the V-shaped March 30th recovery, where for the next 2 months, we go up and up and up. There's a little bit of some dips in between, but naturally, you got all the leverage out of the system. You've got this Iran war ending, theoretically. Earnings have been great. NVIDIA's going to crush it. AMD's this week, Palantir's this week. You're going to have a lot of companies continue to make the argument that AI is transformative. The CapEx from last week was very substantial and strong. And that V-shape allows the market to get back to maybe not all-time highs, but even though the S&P is basically at all-time highs, but you start to normalize more of this price action and things aren't as choppy to the downside. Or you have a 2022 scenario where this is a dead cat bounce effectively, and the momentum that we're seeing is good, but it's not really going to help the names that were the super high beta growth names. On top of that, you've got a rate hike coming up, which is not good for any of these companies. And then you've got the midterms. And when you put those kind of three pieces of the puzzle together, you end up getting an August, September, October slump. And then you get a Santa Claus rally to some extent towards the end of the year. It just depends on how many rate hikes we get. I think the month of August, at least the first couple of weeks of August, will give us an indication of which way this market wants to go. By the way, SpaceX, they are trying their hardest to keep it above 100. 7% of the shares will be unlocking very soon, I believe, like in the next 5 days. This IPO has been a disaster. It's just that simple. It's been good for SpaceX because they, made a ton of money. They raised $85 billion, but for everyone who's invested, it's been a disaster. And I think for the stock market, it's also been a disaster because the amount of liquidity that it swooped up only to give it right back, was just not the best thing. Apparently they have earnings on Wednesday. Or they have earnings tomorrow, I think August 4th. So with AMD, we will see SpaceX earnings. And then the first lockup tranche unlocks, which is about 911 million shares on August 6th. So you've got 116 billion of the 1.4 trillion of the company that is able to be sold. It's almost 10% of it, a little bit less than 10%, around 8.5% in the next 3 days. And so it's just like, in what world does this thing actually, unless you have a ton of buyers and this macro, and this is not a fun macro or a high beta excitement macro. If Bitcoin can barely get a bid above 65,000, how many people are taking a chance on SpaceX right here? Especially when, you've got some other space companies that are out there like Rocket Lab that are still growing as well and don't have that high of a valuation. So it's going to be very interesting. And it also begs the question, what's going to happen with Anthropic and OpenAI, right? If SpaceX's IPO effectively failed for investors, it worked for the company, but that's not really the point. For investors, the market really didn't digest it positively. It had 2 days of success and then boom, it just came crashing down. It's down 50% from the highs, 33% from the IPO price. Where do OpenAI and Anthropic go? And that gets us into the semis. So I don't really have the best reason for you guys for why the semis are down, because I was quite shocked when I woke up in the pre-market and I saw the semis. Nebius, Micron, Micron down 4% is kind of crazy. CoreWeave down 1%, Bloom down 3%, NVIDIA down 0.5%, AMD down 2%, Nebius down 3%, Seagate down 4%, Dell down 1.5%. I don't really know, man. Kospi, yes, maybe this is just pre-market stuff and it bounces when the market opens, because oil down 7% should make the most growthy of growthy names get some love, and they're not. Now, Kospi fell 5%, so I guess if the market's using Kospi as a proxy to the semi trade, which it shouldn't be, it should be a proxy to the memory trade, so I should understand why Micron and Seagate are down, but not necessarily all the other different variables there, then maybe that's the proxy that creates the argument for it. But let's go through some charts. Maybe some charts can help us give some explanation. So this is the Buffett ratio, which historically has tracked when things get super expensive. And I know this ratio has been around for the past couple of years, and it's been showing that the market's really expensive. But as you can see, we have now hit 241%, surpassing the dot-com bubble, the global financial crisis, and the 2022 bear market when you look at the Buffett ratio. So at its core, valuations are expensive if you look at this metric. Obviously, the earnings growth is pushing back against this argument, which is really important. But nonetheless, there are valuations out there that are expensive. And when it goes for the semis, I hate to say it, but if all of these names like an AMD and Micron are still up 80, 100, 200% year to date, and they're now down, 30, 40% from the highs, but they're still up that much year to date, maybe they will spend the next few months consolidating to materialize those gains. I mean, that's basically happened with Palantir, right? Palantir went up like crazy 2023, 2024, and 2025. And now 2026, it's been down for the year, but it's been consolidating. And, Palantir, if you were early, having to consolidate between 120 and 140, you're not that upset about it if you were buying in 2022, 2023. Now, if you bought at the 180s, 190s, 200s, you're pretty upset about it. But if you bought AMD years ago, I don't know if you're that upset that it's kind of stuck between, 420 and 490 and 500, I should say, because it's, still bouncing around that 500 range. If you bought Micron at 400, you're not that upset that it's moving around 700, 800. But if you bought it in the 900 range, it's very annoying. So I think at its core, if some of these semi names just need to grow into their valuations and consolidate in a way that's very healthy for stocks, especially in a way that doesn't create this massive euphoria that gets a ton of leverage into the system, which then allows the semis to take a hit, then maybe that's part of the reason why you're seeing the semis kind of come down right here. I also think the pressure of a rate hike, which those expectations are still there, are not a good thing. And that's not helping either semiconductor sentiment or financing for big tech, because ultimately that money is going back into the semis. And, if rates get more expensive, then obviously that debt becomes more expensive. Now, contrary to that opinion, hedge funds, this is per Goldman Sachs, bought tech stocks at the fastest pace last week since 2022. This stat might be a little bit skewed because, again, you had the Wednesday blow up of Leopold, and then you had the Thursday massive recovery. So that massive recovery where Micron was up 30%, Nebius was up 40% a day. That could have led to hedge funds just jumping in and riding that trend, and they'll be unwinding that position or scaling out of those positions over the coming weeks. So I don't know if it is a sentiment indicator for, tech is cheap, hedge funds are buying in, or tech got really cheap on Wednesday. We found out why. It was a kid who blew up a fund of $45 billion. Therefore, now that event is out of the system, the market can reprice those stocks to be much more lucrative than what they were before, simply because, they didn't need to get that low. There's been many reports over the weekend that once Leopold's fund was going under and other funds found out, they just started shorting the crap out of Micron and SanDisk and Bloom and Nebius. That's why Wednesday felt so painful, because everyone knew he was getting squeezed out, and they ultimately, completely got him out of the system here. And they went short on most of his names. So maybe hedge funds buying in is not sentiment indication. It's more so just taking advantage of the opportunity. So, from that angle, I don't know. I had a lot of good reports of the weekend. Bernstein, they came out with some research. They said, hey, we are going to see the 1 trillion server market by 2028 TAM continue to grow. GPU AI server shipments forecast to 15 to 22% through 2028. They believe that custom ASICs will represent 45% based on AI shipments, while Google TPU shipments are projected to grow about 90% in 2026. They also had some really good research on memory. I think Barclays came out with that. And the memory thing is getting interesting because, once again, as much as the market is excited about memory, I was talking to a few people over the weekend that are deep in memory, and they've gotten to the point where they basically said, okay, memory is definitely a cycle, because there's too many signs around potential supply-demand imbalances fading away, or price action changing in a different direction, or prices potentially peaking, the China memory situation. All these things you can effectively ignore to an extent, but there's elements of them that can't be ignored around the cyclical nature of memory. And if you don't think memory is cyclical and we're going to need all this memory for the end of time, then that's fine. But historically, there has been a pretty aggressive cycle. So the cycle being baked into the 5 PE, which I agree with everyone is cheap for Micron. It probably should be double that PE just to give it some level of respect. But once it got there and things got so euphoric and Apple came out and started blaming Micron for memory inflation, I think the market just started to realize, you can't have a supplier have this much leverage over the companies that are actually building the products and services. And at its core, if that commodity pricing starts to go down just a little bit, we can't have a $1 trillion market cap on something like this, even though I think Micron probably should get back to 1,500 or 1,200 by the end of the year, just if we have a natural bull market. Barclays came out, they said, we think Google's CapEx is going to be $500 billion in 2028. Imagine it's going to be probably close to $300 billion in 2027. So it's not a double by 2028, but it's still going to be a lot. It was 190 for 26, right? It was 190 for 26, around that range, 200 or 190 for 2026. It'll probably be 300 to 350 for 2027. And then 500 for 2028. I mean, Jensen's going to be right. We're going to have by 2030 trillions spent by the Mag 7 on CapEx. And that will go into Micron. That will go into AMD. That will go into NVIDIA. That will go into Nebius, Corey, Bloom, Dell. The whole stack is going to benefit from it. So once again, it's one of those things where I think you have to apply the software mentality to semiconductors right now. Like software stocks have not meaningfully recovered from their absolute lows in April, but a lot of them are good buys based on just pure cash flow and understandings of the business if you don't think they're going to be killed by Anthropic. So you buy them and you hold them and you wait till the market recognizes that. And maybe that's what happens to the semis. The difference here is the semis have already been recognized to such an extent because they've gone up so much from the actual lows. Remember, SanDisk was $40 at one point. Now it's $1,100. But for SanDisk to get to that 17, 1800 range again, it might take more time. And that might present the opportunity right here, but that also might present the opportunity cost if money starts going to the hyperscalers or crypto or software, which I don't think has fully happened yet. I do think some of that money has started to come back to the hyperscalers because, you know, Google and Amazon moving up 10, 15% is a lot of money. Same thing with Microsoft finally getting out from the low 300s, 473. I mean, Microsoft's basically, did you guys know that on Wednesday, Microsoft added $448 billion in market cap? It's the most a company has ever added in the history of the stock market. The previous record was NVIDIA at $441 billion in April of 2025. I feel like that went under the rug and we didn't even realize that Microsoft had that big of a move, but it did. And so, you know, that money had to come from somewhere, right? That money had to come from somewhere. Well-deserved. I agree. Well-deserved. So that money, I think, probably came out of the semis as the market once again went back to sustainable, you know, business models that they know are not going to go away anywhere and that are growing and Microsoft had all the growth metrics that they needed to actually be able to grow. So what are people thinking about semis? Are we still bullish? Are we bearish? Are we still buying the memory trade? I think a lot of the alpha from photonics, memory, et cetera, is now known. It is not a secret. And as a result of that, because everyone knows it, you know, everyone knows what the neoclouds do. It's one of those things where the market has to once again give them their premium, but it's not that unknown. It's not, you know, the picks and shovels are not unknown at this point. People know them, and obviously people are expecting them to make a move. The reason I continue to be bullish is because the capex is like, again, if Google's going to do 500 billion by 2028, you know, Meta's going to be at 300 billion, Microsoft's going to be at 400 billion. Like all that money, once again, is going to go to one sector. So although I don't love the picks and shovels plays because like they're not as sustainable of a business model as the hyperscalers of the software names, I think a lot of them are presenting really good opportunities, especially the neoclouds, because those I think are way more sustainable because it's cloud computing at the end of the day. It's not as picks and shovelly as the other stocks that are out there. So, you know, from that perspective, I think there is an opportunity, but once again, it's going to be up to the market to decide how much momentum they should deserve to have. S&P 500 pre-market, we are still at 0.5%. Again, the only sector that's really down is the semis and the space names. Everything else pre-market are doing all right. I think the AI build-out trade is exhausted. I definitely agree that it's exhausted. And that's okay, right? Because it went up like crazy for 4 months. So for it to chill out in the next 3 months, which would be annoying, but nonetheless, you know, you could imagine happening, it's not that crazy. And hopefully they would create some broader opportunities for people to take advantage of. But it would be the same thing that every other investor went through this year if you didn't own semis. You know, you had to let stuff consolidate as other stuff got more of the cash. Now, there was an interesting discussion on the market close for those that were there. Some seeds of ideas came through around OpenAI and Anthropic, and it's a really interesting theory that I'm trying to go deeper into researching and understanding. That is true. NVIDIA did not really go. The problem with NVIDIA here is that if the semis aren't running, can NVIDIA move outside of the semis, right? If Micron, Nebius, SanDisk, if they're all kind of depressed, can NVIDIA still get to like 220, 230 while those are stuck? I feel like it logically can because like it's NVIDIA. It's obviously separated itself meaningfully from those companies. And, you know, they're going to crush earnings, but will the semiconductor ecosystem, you know, NVIDIA is a large portion of the SMH. If NVIDIA is going to go, is SMH and every other component of the SMH going to be stuck? I think that's the broader question, but we're going to find out in a couple of weeks with earnings. So there was an interesting theory that came out over the weekend. What if I were to tell you that 30% of OpenAI's and Anthropic's revenue is fake? It'd be kind of weird to make sense of what that thesis even contains, right? Why is 30% of Anthropic and OpenAI's revenue fake? And, you know, there's a theory that came over the weekend. I'm trying to deep dive into what it means, but what if there's a world in which the Chinese models that are distilling OpenAI and Anthropic's frontier models are creating millions, hundreds of millions of bots in order to be able to distill those models, and they're paying OpenAI and Anthropic to get access to those models by using those bots. But as a result of all the usage of those bots, aka the distillation, that is what's leading to about 1/3 of their revenues. This was something that was rumored over the weekend. A bunch of people tweeted about it. Then they ended up deleting their tweets, which was very sus in and of itself. There was an ex-OpenAI researcher who just left. His name is Andrew Ho. And he tweeted on X, like, I have $700,000 in OpenAI equity and I'm stuck. And I want to sell this because I do not believe in any of the capacity for OpenAI to meaningfully grow. And part of his large thesis is that not only are the models a commodity, but like this distillation thing is part of the core reason for why OpenAI has been able to grow so much. That fancy ARR metric that OpenAI touted in July, how real is that if a lot of this stuff ends up being fake? Now, again, this is just a theory. This is not necessarily true. The ironic part about this is this would be bullish for the semis, because if OpenAI and Anthropic effectively are faking 30% of the revenue, the on-prem kind of institutional sovereignty argument about building your own models, deploying your own local open source guardrails, like that means you buy more semis. That means you train more semis. That means the semiconductor stack ultimately benefits more. Open source is net bullish for the neoclouds for sure, and obviously net bullish for the semis. The labs, once again, if they're just a commodity, you still need the memory chips, you still need the neoclouds, you still need the energy infrastructure, you still need the GPUs, CPUs, obviously. You still need all of that stuff in order to deploy an open source model. It's just going to cost a lot less for the company that's using it because the token costs have come down so much. But the frontier models, OpenAI and Anthropic, they might not get the benefit of participating in that stack. And so, again, I don't think OpenAI and Anthropic are going out of business or anything, but those S1s are going to be super freaking important, because if they come out and it becomes very obvious that there's not actually 1 billion people using OpenAI, or there's not actually 2 million businesses paying for OpenAI as they claim, but there's something a little under the hood that if you really go through the S1, it becomes obvious that like this isn't what they say what they say they are to be, or what their trajectory is. I think a lot of people are going to question it. I think the IPO is not going to go that well. And then the switch to open source once again becomes pretty dramatic. Now, that doesn't have to happen, but if that would happen, yeah, Oracle would definitely get hit right there. It would just mean that OpenAI and Anthropic can't fulfill their spending commitments. And so that's a theory that's out there. That could be part of the reason why the semis are taking a hit, just because the sentiment of OpenAI and Anthropic is bad. Again, that theory needs some legs to it. I've been trying to do some more research on it, but it's just weird seeing these people tweet about it and then delete their tweets. It's like, who's telling them to delete their tweets? Like, why are they so scared to have those tweets out there? And you just start to wonder, like, what is going on right here, and where is this revenue going? Chamath quote tweeted one of them, and the tweet was deleted. And I looked into the person, and she runs like a $250 million venture fund. And it's like, okay, why does she put that out there? Does she have some companies that are benefiting from open source and she wants to spread some FUD, or does she really have some real sources, but they told her to take it down? Like, it's weird stuff going on in the Valley. And I think we're going to have to definitely do a lot more digging to kind of find out what's happening here. But the broader point is you just have negative news pieces around the semis in general. I think that's also part of the reason they've been taking a hit. Days Guy says, I'm deep into the illegal token market, and the Chinese mostly use freeze trials and free accounts and carded accounts, etc. They don't pay full price. Yeah, and the OpenAI and Anthropic don't do KYC. So they don't force you to put in your driver's license or your passport to know you're a real person. So, if there are some Chinese bots that are signing up, they could be signing up without having to meaningfully, prove that they're a real human. And that could also be leading to some pain. So we're going to find out over the coming months, but I'm also really curious to see if we're going to get these damn IPOs, because if we don't, then obviously it means that, the numbers just aren't good enough yet to be in the public markets. Tesla, so some updates on them. Tesla sales in Spain went down 81% year over year. They sold 131 vehicles in July. Sales did rise 20% year over year during the first 7 months of 2026. Spain's broader electrified vehicle market grew 35%. So you've got the Tesla deliveries in different parts of Europe that have not necessarily recovered from the worst of it in 2024, when Elon kind of explicitly went political and a lot of the Europeans didn't agree with his political viewpoint. And so you're seeing some of the ramifications of that. You've got a lot of theories that Tesla stock is going down so that Elon could buy it for the cheap with SpaceX. At this point, I don't think the SpaceX IPO or SpaceX merger is going to happen, tomorrow, but it does feel like it could happen sooner than later based on that report from the Wall Street Journal that the Chinese part of the business might be separated, which it would have to be effectively to get merged. And also if Tesla Tesla goes down another 10%, it actually might be a deal for SpaceX to buy it. Because I don't know if it's going back down to the 100s or something, but if that were to happen, I feel like Elon would take the opportunity. I just don't know when that's going to be the case. S&P 500 right here, earnings continue to be strong. 85% of companies have already beat on earnings. So the S&P has reached its cheapest valuation relative to the rest of the world in 6 years compared to the other emerging markets. Emerging markets have done a lot better than the S&P, but the S&P itself has done very well in and of itself when it looks at the earnings growth. Yes, the Elon said it was fake news, but remember, Elon says things are fake doesn't mean they are entirely fake. So there are parts of that Wall Street Journal article that probably were fake or not necessarily accurate. But the overall sentiment, I mean, if you're a Tesla shareholder, logically think about it, how could SpaceX, a defense contractor that has very private US military secrets, merge with a company that has 25% of its business happening in China? It's not possible. So at some point, you would have to have some type of friction that removes Tesla from China if it's going to, get subsumed by SpaceX, which it would be an independent entity. So I think that is very true. Now, maybe it's not happening tomorrow. Maybe it's not happening anytime soon. Maybe some of the discussions were not as reported as accurately as they needed to be, but it's got to happen. There's no way the FTC is going to allow China to be part of SpaceX. There's just no freaking way, or else SpaceX is going to lose a ton of government contracts. So the question is when and how that plays out, but also, is that the reason you buy Tesla, just for that eventual moment to happen? ARM right there, that's down about 2.5%. Intel is also down 2%. Here's what Mr. Tom Lee had to say this morning about some of the sell-off that we've experienced so far.
% kind of drawdown.
That's what you thought. It was not a good month for July, and you said that it was, even for what you were expecting, it was not as positive as you were thinking. But the averages didn't do that. There was a day where the Dow went down 1250. Who knows what's going? That was an AI unwind for that hedge fund to explain it. Doesn't matter what caused it. It did get down, 7,200, nowhere near 6.
No,
or maybe 73. How low did I'm just off the top of my head. Is that enough now?
Well, I think August is a month to recover how June and July have been sort of flat months, but earnings estimates have gone up a lot. So the stock market's kind of a coiled spring. And then we had a huge deleveraging, as you're talking about, because of the AI unwind and Korea's policymakers panicking. So I think the markets could actually rebound strongly this month. Maybe we get to 7,800.
This month, the 7,800.
Yeah, for the S&P.
Is that forecast for the 10% drawdown still intact?
Yes.
It is?
Yeah, so...
Can't you take that off the table? Will you do it for me? Say it doesn't have to. No, I'm kidding. So we get to 7,800, maybe a 10% drawdown, and then close the year above 8,000.
Yes. Yeah, I think because as we start to look at 2027, there's a lot of the clouds that are heading this year kind of lift. The SpaceX unlock will be behind us, and the market testing of the new Fed will be behind us. So I think, and then of course there's already been a leverage unwind. So I think 2027 could be one of the best years for the stock market.
And you think part of the positive sentiment this month is going to be cooler inflation data? Why?
Yes.
Why? Oil's back up.
Yeah, oil's up, and we still have the tariffs working through. So those are hitting the CPI numbers, but the real driver of inflation historically has been housing and wages. And housing has really disinflated. We've had 3 months now of declining home prices. So you're taking out one of the biggest weights for inflation. And then I think wage inflation is really muted. We'll find out this Friday.
Hey, Tom, I just want to ask you what you think of the Leopold Aschenbrenner situation and the idea that he was highly leveraged 4 times, had to unwind this stuff. How much of that played into what you were just talking about with South Korea and the panic that happened there? How much of that was because he was selling that portfolio at the same time?
I think it was a big factor because, as you know, Korea is basically two companies, Samsung and Hynix, so it's memory and semis. He, of course, had a very large following. So not only was his leverage on his $45 billion, let's say it was levered to 100 50 billion, but there was a lot of money piggybacking on his trade. So I think in some ways, the unwind, and even last week, was due to a lot of funds being aware that he might have been in trouble.
So once again, I'm not necessarily sure what Tom's thesis is right here, because his argument is we're going to get up to 7,800 and then we're going to have the 10% decline or 15% decline, which would put us at 6,900. Originally, it was supposed to be like 6,300 because we were supposed to fall from 7,300. Like, remember, it was supposed to be 73 top and then go down to 62, 63. It was supposed to be like 62.50. Now he's saying 78, and then we go down to like 69. So, once again, I'm just incredibly confused on the point that he's trying to make. Like, we've had a bear market for the semis, peak to trough, but obviously the semis have done so well. The S&P has not had any resemblance of a bear market, has not had anything that even feels like a bear market. I mean, 760 to 730, 725 is not a bear market. It's like 3-4% max. You need to get to at least 7, 8, 9% to have a bear market. And now we're right back ultimately at all-time highs at 740 or 750. 760 is all-time high. So we haven't really diverted that much. And from that perspective, even with the Leopold situation, which was ugly, I wonder if that means that, the entire market has to get hit, because I feel like the market really did get hit in July, at least the most high beta parts of it, as NVIDIA gets pretty ugly right here, 2 minutes into the open, now 197. And I don't know if we need to go back down below 7,000. Also, take a look at this. So these were the 7 largest positions that were down for Leopold. He had about 11.4 billion of Nebius, Bloom, SanDisk, CoreWeave, Iren, Core Scientific, and Applied Digital. It went down to 5.6 billion on July 9th, which is when he sold it. He was down on average 50%. The next day, it was up 2.2 billion, which means Ken Griffin basically made a free 2 billion in a day. And if Leopold had waited to sell on July 30th and, the market would have bounced, technically, his liquidation was the reason the market bounced. So I don't know if it would have bounced, but if it did, he would have saved a couple $1 billion. And so obviously it's just been an unbelievably dramatic liquidation and sell-off, but I don't know if that means the broader market needs to get hit and needs to go down another 5-10%, because that has already taken place. I feel like you would need a real big macro catalyst. I mean, we're talking about 10% down on the S&P. Like, what gets us there? What is that catalyst that makes it happen, especially when the semis have already taken that big of a hit? And there's probably some type of catalyst out there, but if the oil thing is resolved and the Fed doesn't hike rates, then maybe it doesn't have to be that aggressive. If anything, if that does happen, the hyperscalers will get hit, and they've just started to recover and go green for the year. So there's a lot more questions on how we would end up going red if we do, but the semis, once again, have been kind of stuck, and I think the sentiment around them is a different question that the market has to try to figure out. All right, we got 20 seconds. Thank you all for being here. Let's see what we can get for the first day of August. We got Palantir earnings after the bell. We got a lot of stuff that we got to get into today. AMD tomorrow. So it'll be a big week. And hopefully we can see some relief on some of these names that have obviously taken a pretty ugly hit in the month of July. Thank you all for being here. It is 9:30, first trading day of August. The stock market is now... hold on. Why is my bell kind of stuck? That was anticlimactic. Okay, the magnet on my bell is stuck, so it's not going to be able to ring as well. This is a bad sign for August, bro. This is a horrible sign for August. I can ring it, but it's not going to ring that well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the backup. Yeah, we're cooked for August, bro. We are fucking cooked for August. I'm going to bring up good old Reliable right here, and we are going to use this to open the market. I'm sorry for the people who watch new here every day. It's usually... I'll show you guys what happens to the bell after. All right, market's open. If we dump, don't blame it on me. Blame it on the bell. Real quick, look, you see the thing? It's stuck. So it's not moving. I don't know what's... The magnet sometimes gets stuck. I don't... Today it decided to get stuck. All right, there we go. I like this bell. See, the people who love to mute, they're happy about this today. S&P 500 opens up. All right, 0.35%. We are green on the S&P. NVIDIA gets a little bit of a rebound as soon as we get into the open. 198.62, even though that's still red on the day. If we start off red for the month, it will be the Bell's fault. Robinhood, which does not deserve to be below 90 after those earnings. 85.92, that goes down. Apple continues to go down. Nebius, whoa. That one gets hit. Micron, whoa. That one gets hit. Amazon, whoa. That one goes up. Okay, I think it's a little obvious right here. Money is rotating potentially. I know it's been a couple minutes since the market opened, but for Amazon to get a 4% move and for Micron and Nebius to go down, I think money's leaving some of the semis and going back to the hyperscalers, which is the same thing that's been happening in reverse all year for the semis. SanDisk, that's down 7%. IREM, that's down 3%. TSM, that's down 1%. Marvell, down 5%. Astera, down 7%. Once again, the semis open, and they're getting a bit crushed right here. Keel, down 5%. Qualcomm, down 2%. ARM, down 7%. ARM, down another $18. Broadcom, down 2%. Dude, are these names going back to where they were the day Leopold sold them? Some of them are not that far away, if we're being honest. Some of them are not that far away. AMD, 458, that's down 3%. Palantir opens at 124, that's up 1%. Rocket Lab, that's down 3%. How about our software name? ServiceNow is green. That's 4%. Salesforce is green. That's 3%. You have Adobe, that should be green. That is very green, 3%. Microsoft is green, 480. Maybe that SaaS summer thesis is starting to come to fruition. I was a bit skeptical last week, simply because of the fact that my heart's been broken too many times by the SaaS names going up. But this is now almost 4 days in a row where SaaS is getting some love, and semis, even after the rebound they had on Thursday, are not getting as much love. And the hyperscalers, the SaaS and hyperscalers have basically been trading with each other. So if the hyperscalers are up and the SaaS names are up at the same time and the semis are down, I mean, you might have some legitimate rotation that's happening. Nebius, that's down 6%. Amazon has officially hit $3 trillion as this one once again gets. This is an all-time high on Amazon? Wow, Amazon, it's crazy that this thing hasn't been at 3 trillion for the majority of the year, with all the other companies being at like 4.5 trillion. Yeah, Amazon hits 3 trillion for the first time. 284 is what you're seeing right here. 284.17, 282.56 at 3 trillion. For so many of us, this is a big part of the buy and hold long portfolio. Same thing with Microsoft right here, 485, that's up 4%. It is very, very nice to see the Mag 7 participate, because I mean, quite frankly, I think the majority of us have way more Mag 7 than we have in the semis. Google right there trying to get up to 370. I mean, Google's going back to 400 if Amazon continues on this trajectory, especially if CapEx is not the concern, or the equity dilution raise is not a concern as well. Now, maybe Amazon does some equity dilution as well. They didn't hint at that, but if they were to do it, I wonder if the market would even care. If you take Amazon back to 230, I think everyone's buying that dip if somehow it gets there. Figma, that's up 3.4%. That's a software play. Uber, that is up 1.12%. SoFi trying to get back up to 1662. That was down 10% last week, I think, unfairly. So that one's at least getting some love. Netflix kind of trades with software names. That one continues to be green. Meta coming back. Thank you, market, for not being stupid about Meta. I get it's not as amazing as Amazon or Google, but it did not deserve to be $18 away from going below 500. So, I mean, look, it's kind of the yin and yang of the market, right? For the first 4 months, semis were all the craze. Hyperscalers were dead. You had sell-side analysts coming out saying that we think there's no point of it. I mean, you really had sell-side analysts coming out saying, sell your hyperscalers and buy the CapEx beneficiaries, because the companies that are spending on the CapEx can't benefit from it. And it was just like the most shocking thing ever to see professional investment analysts say, sell Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and buy all the semis instead. And that was the literal top. The day that note came out from Melius Research, and then all the other institutional analysts started touting the same stuff, that was when Micron hit 1250 after earnings. And that was the short-term top. That was the short-term bottom for the hyperscalers, as the sell side completely got it wrong. It's like you give the money to the companies that can spend the CapEx to then grow because they have a sustainable business model, versus the companies that are getting the CapEx. Unfortunately, you know, eventually their cycle will come to an end. Now, the weird thing about what's going on right here is that's a broader philosophical statement you can say about the cycle coming to an end. But from everything we've seen from the hyperscalers on CapEx spend, the cycle is not coming to an end anytime soon. So it's very weird to see the semis go down. But if the market has moved on from like the excitement of the semis and they're going back to sustainable business models, then maybe this is how the sentiment's going to take place. It's just at some point the forward multiples are going to get kind of stupid on many of these semi names that are going to benefit from the hundreds of billions of dollars that are being spent in CapEx. AMD right there, 463, as that one continues to go down. SanDisk getting a nice little move up there, which once again, SanDisk, Micron, they will be massive beneficiary of all this CapEx, which is why kind of, last week, I don't know if the idea is that crazy to say, why can't everyone benefit? Why can't the hyperscalers benefit? Because they're getting an ROI on the CapEx. Why can't the CapEx beneficiaries benefit? Because they're getting earnings growth. Instead of one or two of them going parabolic like we saw for the first 5 months of the year, what if they all naturally can get the juice of the bull market, which is what we've seen for the past 3 years before it was so one-sided starting in 2026. And maybe that's how this ends up kind of playing out. CoreWeave flips green. That's up 3. Nebius flips green as well. Oh, Nebius does have earnings this week. It's going to be a big one. I think on Wednesday pre-market. So you're going to see that be very, very important. Tesla right there, 317. That goes green. Did Trump say something? Because I think everything starting to flip right here. Amazon officially 3 trillion. Don't have any macro news. Oh, sorry. Nebius is August 12th. My bad. You're right. August 12th. So in 2 weeks, we'll see Nebius. Adobe still moving. Salesforce still moving. ServiceNow still moving. Micron trying to get back up to 800. If the semis end up officially flipping green today, I wonder if that takes the hyperscalers down. And based on what I'm looking at, no, they're not. The hyperscale, look at Amazon, not even blinking as the semis get some green candles, which historically it would start to fade a little bit. Same thing with Microsoft, not blinking either. 5%. Dude, that's a big move on Amazon. 5%, big move on Google, 4%, big move on Meta, 4%, then big move on Microsoft, 5%. If anything, it makes me kind of think, maybe a lot of these names can participate together. ServiceNow, that's up 5%. S&P 500, 751. Reddit should be up. Reddit's sell-off was stupid. Like, genuinely stupid. I bought more Reddit at 147 last week. This thing got to 135. I'm trying to do more research on the earnings and the quarter itself, but I think search for referral traffic as a reason to sell it off does not make sense. If anything, I think it's a decent candidate to sell puts on in the 125, 130 range. But yeah, I think Reddit is pretty cheap for a reason. But there has to be a deeper reason it sold off so much. So I'm trying to go through the quarter and feel like what actually was the street upset about? Because 20% felt a bit aggressive. MicroStrategy, that's down 0.5%. 300 is on the table for Amazon. It feels like Amazon has a date with 300, right? Like, people are predicting 300 on Amazon for a long time, and it kind of didn't take place. And now we're trying to see it. See, you guys can't blame the bell today. The problem is now if the bell works tomorrow and we dump, you're going to blame the bell for the dump. That's how the superstitions go. Look, there's no bell, and the Max 7 add what? Almost 450 billion in market cap collectively in 9 minutes? I mean, if that's all we needed to do, I would have stopped ringing the damn bell freaking months ago. I've got too much Mag 7 exposure to keep ringing this bell. That's all it needed was the bell to not work. We would have cooperated. Amazon 286, baby. As this one continues to go higher. Zeta is 2273. That's up 5%. Palantir. So again, Street's expecting 1.8 billion. I think there's a world where they do 1.95 to 2. I think they'll get close to 2, but they won't show 2. If they do, if Carp wants to flex and they show the 2 billion number, I think the stock's going up. But I still think if it's like 1.95, 1.93, it gets there. Now, if they do 1.83, 1.84, I don't know if it's a big enough beat to get the stock to really be excited. So it's still going to be a massive year-over-year growth rate. It's just, that 2 billion number would be what gets people really excited. I mean, Palantir is still on a forward basis cheaper than Snowflake and CrowdStrike. That's how weird the SaaS valuations on names that aren't even profitable have gotten compared to Palantir. So, it's been 3 quarters in a row, pump and then dump. I think this might be the one where things potentially change. Marvell still down about 4%. Astera down 4%. Coinbase still down 2%. CoreWeave, let's see if this one can break 80. It still has got a long way to go. 82.17 was my last dip buy on this. And I think a lot of people in that 80 to 90 range ended up buying the dip. And then obviously, people didn't expect it to go below 60, but it did happen. So let's see if that one can make a move higher. Microsoft, wow. Let's check the resistance at 500. As Microsoft, it seems like overnight, sentiment has changed on one of the greatest companies in the world, which you would expect, the market to one day recognize. And after those earnings, it has 235,000 shares for Microsoft at 500. So a little bit of juice to get there. Even Tesla's up today. It shows you how much the market's back to liking the Mag 7. 300 on Amazon in terms of resistance. We still got a long way to go, but it's about 328,000 shares. And then Meta getting back to 600. I don't think is that crazy given Meta, is the cheapest out of all of them right now. But once again, sentiment changed on Amazon, sentiment changed on Google, sentiment changed on Microsoft. Meta has a lot of different issues to deal with, but they're the most important company on the planet when it comes to media and advertising outside of Google. Like, I think the sentiment will change eventually. And when it does, Meta probably gets re-rated. Wow, ServiceNow, 120. A lot of retail has ServiceNow. It would be very nice to see that one make the move, 119.06. I think this was the software dip buy for the majority of people for the past 5 months. And I mean, it's starting now. Granted, ServiceNow did this. All the software names did this in May. ServiceNow got up to 140. Adobe was at freaking 280. Salesforce was at 200, and then they all dumped. I think a lot has changed since then. And this is what you would expect out of the software names, right? If Micron's going to be down 5% of the day, you expect the software names to get some love and the hyperscalers. And that hasn't happened throughout all of July. If that's what's going to start to happen in August, then, that trade might be intact. But once again, the earnings from the semi names, I think, don't necessarily justify them being down as hard as they are. Shopify right there, 120.99 is that. Yeah, even Uber catching a bit. Uber's been dead all year, dude. Uber looks really interesting, man. When you look at their financials, it looks very interesting. I think the reason Uber's been dead is because of the robotaxi narrative. But outside of that, dude, this is a phenomenal business that's growing exceptionally well. Great management. They just did a major acquisition. Like, you can understand why Bill Ackman has so much of it. It's literally been self-made. By the way, speaking of Bill Ackman, he's got Amazon, Meta, and Microsoft. He sold a lot of his Google, but I mean, his portfolio, which was down 25% year to date, we'll see what it's looking like, but I think his portfolio is getting close to break even as all those names are making a move. GameStop did another convertible debt offering of $1.9 billion. That's why it's down 10%. And I think GameStop's doing that to be able to buy their own debt back to then be able to have a better bid for eBay. So that's why GameStop is down. Amazon, 285. 285 for Mr. Amazon. VIX is at 16. Semis aren't still up today on aggregate. SMH is still down 3%. So you're not really seeing the semis move with the software names. Micron today got to 770. It's at 786. So you've got the bounce on the semis. SanDisk was at 1120. Now it's at 1200, but they're still down. So if they can move another 1 or 2% in aggregate, the semis will be up on the day. SpaceX trying to break green, but that's basically flat on the day. As we're seeing that make a broader move. What do you think about Grab after the bell? I think Grab can do well after the bell. The broader problem right here is oil sentiment. Now, again, oil is down, and oil was somewhat down in Q2, which should help them. Oil down today should somewhat help them, but once again, does the market give the premium to a name that I think will still be negatively affected by oil if oil continues to be down? What I'm looking for is financial services growth. I think also top line revenue growth. I mean, they grew 24% in a really hard Q1. Q1, they usually do not grow that much. If they can get that to 28, 29% in Q2 with financial services continue to grow, that will be good. The other problem that they're having is the same problem with Uber. It's the robotaxi narrative affecting all of the ride hailing companies, even though, robotaxis aren't changing anything fundamentally about their businesses. So financial services will be the thing I look out for today, along with adjusted EBITDA margin growth, which should be closing in on that 45-50% range. And then we're going to have to see if the market reacts in any meaningful way. SoFi right there, 1680. That's up 3%. Figma up 7%. eBay's down 5%, probably because of that GameStop offering. I think the market's probably looking at the GameStop convertible debt and saying there's no way they could actually buy eBay. I don't even know how this $1.9 billion they're issuing today helps them buy eBay. I guess it gets them closer to it, but I don't know if it fully closes the gap on having the cash necessary to do it. Broadcom down 3%, still Qualcomm down 3%. That's why eBay could be down. T1 Energy in the software space, or not software, solar space, that's up 1.5. Got hit pretty hard the other day. Oh, PMI, did we just get that? Let's see. I think we have a beat on PMI. Last week we had a beat on services, ISM. PMI Street wanted 53.8. We came in at 53.9. Okay, very small beat, but it was a beat. So I don't know if the Street's going to care. It's a relatively small beat. We have services, ISM, coming up in like 15 minutes. The PMI was beat. CoreWeave right there at 76. Yeah, manufacturing PMI 53.9 versus 53.8. Interesting. So some of the neoclouds are going up, some of them are going down. IREN just broke green. It was red for the past 10 minutes. CoreWeave has stayed green. Nebius has officially broken green, 192. It's your hyperscalers, though, that are really loving it. Look at Google, dude. Google, they let Google go to 315 after earnings. Right back at 372. I mean, Berkshire did buy a ton of it at 350, and it was below that 350 price. By the way, speaking of Berkshire Hathaway, that stock is now up 5% year to date. It's not that far from the S&P, quite frankly. And in the past month, it's up 3%, past 6 months, up 6%. So Berkshire, which was down a lot for the year before this month, has started to get a recovery. Why is Apple down? So Apple, once again, did anyone really think at 340 the valuation made any sense on this? Because as much as I love Apple, as much as I use their products, as much as the growth is accelerating, it was not, I mean, dude, it got to $345. People were paying 45 times earnings for 15% growth. Like this was not like, it's eventually going to get to $400. I just think it got there really quickly. And remember, the reason people were buying Apple was because everything was dropping. So that was like your safety trade, which is what always happens. So less than expected better metrics on earnings, which again, earnings were amazing. It's not like Apple's earnings were bad or there was any red flags. It's just like, it wasn't perfect. And it was trading at a very premium valuation as like the world's largest company. Like, you can't do that. NVIDIA always beats expectations as the world's largest company by tenfold, right? Like, really make sure that if their stock goes down, people can't say it's because of NVIDIA's, lack of execution. Whereas Apple, there were certain metrics that missed on services in China. And so if growth stocks get more attention, like CoreWeave, that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's probably coming from Apple. So I think Apple being down here actually makes sense. It'll probably get back to where it was in a more reasonable time frame, but it went from 300 to 350 in like 2 weeks. Like that didn't make a lot of sense to me. Zeta, that's also getting some love. They have earnings, I think, tomorrow, if I'm not wrong. So this one also this week will be very, very important. AMD is struggling right here. AMD is going to be a big one tomorrow. Again, AMD's multiple, I think, is a bit aggressive, even if you think they're going to get that $20 of EPS by 2030. So AMD and Intel, I mean, it was literally the perfect time for AMD to report on their last earnings. I think the stock was like, 350? It dumped to 320. And then within minutes of the earnings, it went all the way up to like 420. And then the next day it was like at 450. Now, I think sentiment has shifted away from the semis, and AMD is going to have the most amazing numbers on the planet to make sense of its multiple, which I think they'll have good numbers. I don't think they're going to have NVIDIA type of numbers in terms of the beat and raises. And so then it begs the question, where does the market take the CPU trade? Intel as well has been, pretty decimated as well from the top. Are you still holding ServiceNow? Yes. A small position. I bought at 105, but nothing that serious. But, even at 105, 100, after it fell from 140, I bought Microsoft that day at 385. Like, a lot of these names just did not deserve to be hit the way they are. But, Zeta, strong name in the software space, doing well. Palantir obviously been struggling, but it, rebounded from the 107s. Shopify and Reddit, I think, are going to be exceptional companies over the coming years to buy, and Shopify's done well from 103. Reddit's basically flat from 140 entry, but it did get up to 200 at one point. The software investors have not outperformed the semi investors this year, unless your portfolio is heavily leveraged to the semis and you bought in June. But if your portfolio is leveraged to semis and you bought in April and May, you're still probably widely outperforming a software investor or a hyperscaler investor. because the semis have still done so damn well. I mean, Intel was stuck at like, 30 to 40 bucks for the majority of the year before it got the breakout. It's just, I think a lot of people got into Intel at 120, 130, thinking like, it's the Taiwan of America, TSMC of America. It's going to go to 200. And I think that's what happened to Leopold, right? Oh, wow. Reddit's actually 147. All right, cool. It should be getting some love today if the software names are going up. I think that's what happened to Leopold, dude. I think he had such massive positions in these names. And he was just like, yeah, Intel's going to matter a lot. And at 140, instead of taking profits, which I think he bought the thing at like 30 bucks last year, he just said, if it goes to 120, who cares? It'll be at 200 one day. And it's like, it might be at 200 one day. But in the meantime, if you're on leverage, you have to stay solvent to be able to see that day. Microsoft, 490. Could you imagine we get a $500 move here? Could you imagine we get a 500 handle on Mr. Microsoft? There's no CoreWeave news, guys. I think it's just a bounce. It should be bouncing. I mean, this thing fell 60%. So I don't think there needs to be news for any of these names to like get back to even, a fourth of where they were trading at before, 77.30. It is outperforming all the neoclouds today, though. So I feel like there might be a headline, but I do not see any headlines on this one. CoreWeave's interesting, dude. It's like their market cap's 40 billion. They have 100 billion in backlog. Their market cap is half of the revenue they're going to generate in 2 years. I mean, like logically, if we're compute constrained and prices for GB300 rentals are going up, like, yes, I understand they have debt, but like, does the debt discount the value of the company to that extent? Not saying it has to go back to all-time highs, but that 95 range that it was trading at for a long time, I feel like it's not crazy for it to get back up there. But we're going to have to see. Oracle getting some love. Oh, wow, getting a lot of love. Look at that. 7% on Oracle is a big one. It was at 114 last week. So this one was important to be able to see. ServiceNow also 119. Oracle is a software company today. It's not a data center company. So that's helping out, even though the neoclouds are doing okay. So some of that data center sentiment's helping it. Palo Alto, that's up 1%. Okay, not bad. Not a bad start to the week. Even the semis, I know they're down, but they're not, they're not collapsing. Nebius just flipped green. Iren just flipped very green. Look at this SPY, dude. You're having a lot of stuff participate now, not just software. And the hyperscalers that are starting to participate are putting in a decent amount of work right here. Dude, Meta's not that far from 600. If you bought the dip 518 last week, boom. You're up almost 20% right there. NVIDIA's got to get above 200, dude. This is just stupid NVIDIA being red on the day. Like, genuinely stupid NVIDIA being stuck below 200. This needs to get to 210, 215 and just normalize there at these levels. CoreWeave up 10 on the day. All right, now I feel like there's some news with how it's running, but I don't have anything to see that could be news. Maybe this market just felt it was time to not let this one get hit as hard. Trump just tweeted about the CEO of Chevron. He said that without our operation in Venezuela, Chevron would be dead. And he says other oil companies should lower their prices right now, immediately. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I don't think Trump fully understands how a gas station works, but they can't just lower their prices that easily. But maybe they do. Maybe they do for Trump. NVIDIA back above 200. Okay, there you go. With the rally that we're seeing right here, we should get well above 200. At least 205 would be very nice to see today. But maybe that's asking for too much. CrowdStrike, that's green. Palo Alto, that's green. Or he could stop the war. That would also help. Again, part of the reason we're having this rally, folks, is if you missed it in the morning, oil's down 7%. Trump yesterday said that, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but yesterday he said we want to negotiate. We want to stop the war. We don't want to attack them. There would be too much damage. We don't want to kill people unnecessarily. Like all the things that you would expect someone to say who's rationally thinking about the situation. The question is, do you believe it? And at least the market, I think right now, is starting to believe it more than not because they know that this game can't go on forever. Maybe the market's wrong once again, but if we're really getting to the end of this, then we should have some level of relief right here. Zeta up 5, NVIDIA very close to officially breaking green today. Why is Bitcoin down? You know, that's so interesting. I don't know, dude. Bitcoin did get a nice little candle right there, up to 63, but I feel like you just need rate cuts and liquidity for Bitcoin at this point. Like this one has just been unbelievable for this thing to be this dead for this long. Clarity Act getting delayed until after August might be part of the reason. But people have decided to buy stocks over crypto pretty aggressively. CoreWeave, 12% move right there as that continues to make a hit. Nebby is trying to go for 200. Oracle trying to go for 140. NVIDIA, thank you. That goes green. Oh, NVIDIA is moving now. If this is not a little fake move, and this feels a bit more real than not, I feel like we can end the day pretty strong as well. Goldman, by the way, added Microsoft to their U.S. conviction list today. As per Citadel, retail's aggressive buying of semiconductor and memory stocks sharply reversed in late July. And let me see if I can pull up the chart right here. You can see in late July, there was a lot of capitulation by retail on the sell side for many of the semiconductor names. If this kind of reverses into August, this would be bullish. I mean, look at that. Look at how ugly July was for retail net sales of semiconductors and memory names. Like that right there explains why Wednesday was so bad. And then part of the reason retail was selling, A, because of the margin calls, A, because of liquidations, but also because of the hedge funds that were shorting these names so aggressively that like retail, you know, got stopped out a lot of positions and just had to sell at some point when the sentiment got that bad. And if that reverses, because that sentiment is not as bad anymore, then, you know, we should see a lot more excitement right there. Nebius 202, Meta 592, NVIDIA almost 202. What a day, dude. CoreWeave up 11, ServiceNow up 7. Hoodie's got to get back to 90 with this. You cannot have Hood below 90 with this much green. I would imagine Hood's going to try right there for 90. Verizon up 1.4. NVIDIA 205 is the number. We got to get 205 and hold it, but absolutely NVIDIA should be getting this move right here. And then Amazon and Microsoft continuing to just have a really strong day. Where's Micron? Are we still at 780? Micron's at 790. Micron's about to flip green. I mean, I think today would be the first day in like 7 months if the semis actually flip green today, all of them, where semis, software, and hyperscalers are green together. Like, when's the last time we actually had that happen? The only names that are down are the crypto names, which makes sense. The energy names, because oil's down. That makes sense. Like, Marvell was down 8% this morning. Now it's barely down 2%. I mean, that would be a very nice reversal. SK Hynix was down 7. Now it's down 3. The space names are flipping green as well. Corning, that's up. Lemonade, that's up 8%. Fastly, that is up 1%. Grab is up 3.2%. I mean, you just might have a better macro backdrop going into it. I mean, is it too late to buy more Mag 7? Absolutely not, in my opinion, because the Mag 7 are, you know, some of the greatest companies in the world, and their earnings have taught a lot to the market around where their CapEx expenditures are going and how that's going to release their ROI. However, you know, just like we said, the easy money's been made on the semis. You know, Amazon at 215 to 230 was stupid, right? Microsoft below 400 was stupid. Meta, I still think Meta's the Mag 7 that's actually stupid. But like, buying Amazon at all-time highs is not easy money anymore. Now, next 5 years, probably still going to be very happy, right, that you bought Amazon. But 100% after these earnings moves. Google at 320 was a bit more easy after it fell 8% after earnings. Google at 370 is not as easy anymore, right? But we've had ample amount of time to buy the dip on the Mag 7. So it's one of those things where it's like, I wouldn't be eager to buy into the strength of the Mag 7 because, after you have a massive rip, you have some consolidation period, and the Mag 7 for the past 5 months have been depressed. So I think that time, just like I think it wasn't smart to buy Micron at 1250. I don't know if it's the smartest thing to buy Amazon at 286, the first time ever it's hit a $3 trillion market cap. Long term, sure, it'll be fine. Just short term, these names have coiled up for so long. This is the breakout. And if you're fine buying the breakout, that's cool, but I don't know if the risk reward is amazing anymore. Having said that, a lot of us have been buying the dip on the Mag 7. So now you kind of just sit back and let the market do its thing and recognize that these companies don't deserve to be trading here. ISM, I think it was good as well. Let's get the update on that. Seems like the market might be liking it.
Comes in minus 1/10, minus 0.1%. That would be the lightest since it was negative minus 0.3% in February. If we look at manufacturing, these are fresh July reads from the ISM on manufacturing. Comes in much better than expected, 55.6. That would be the best read in over 4 years since May.
Wow. Best read in over 4 years. Holy crap. That's 55.6 versus 53.9. That's not recessionary. That is a little inflationary, but if you can get oil to come down, I mean, the Fed might not love seeing that. The economy and earnings growth probably love seeing that. If you could just get inflation under control, you would have low inflation and really strong growth, which would just be very good for the stock market.
Of 22. Now we look at prices paid, and of course, we'd rather have these numbers go down, expecting 71 in the rearview mirror, 73. It comes in at 71.1. So pretty close to expectation.
Makes sense. Prices are going up if earnings are good, which means, again, that's the pressure on inflation. But if inflation could be resolved through some of the geopolitical stuff, then you're going to have low inflation and good earnings, and then really strong economic expansion via PMI and services.
Definitely less than our last look. That would be the smallest level, the smallest increase in prices paid going back to February when we were 70.5 on new orders, 56.7, exactly as expected. That would be the best read since the beginning of the year when we were at 57.1, second best read of the year. And finally, on the employment front, and what a week. Of course, we have ADP and the big jobs report from BLS on Friday. Employment comes in better than expected. Expecting a number right at the expansion line of 50, comes in at 52.8. And this is a biggie. We are reversing many months of sub 50. Hasn't been above 50 going all the way back. And this is interesting, since September of 23. So 52.8 now would be the best read since August of 22, basically 4 years. That is a big number to pay attention to. Let's see if we see better than expected numbers in the labor reports.
Dude, I think that's the best ISM manufacturing report we've seen in what? In a year minimum, maybe 2 years. NVIDIA keeps going, 202.20. Like, those were phenomenal numbers across the board. Calls just crossed puts on QQQ, by the way. Net premium just shifted to effectively being more bullish than bearish on the NASDAQ. The Q's got to be above 700. Q's not there yet, but we're trying to get there. We are trying to get there. Micron got rejected at 790. Google still holding on to 371. Meta almost at 590. Adobe again, that's up 3. Rocket Lab, that's up 4. And then CrowdStrike still up 3. So, let's see if we give back any of these gains. But at its core, you got the macro numbers that definitely are making people happy. Look at that, 753 on the SP. Again, 761 is the all-time high. No, 758 actually. We hit 760 pre-market, 758.45. So we are $5 away theoretically from the all-time highs. Let's get an update on the yen situation, because there was a photo that was tweeted over the weekend from Besant's napkin saying that the U.S. would intervene. And you're probably going to see more of that intervention, which is affecting these 10-year yields as well.
They impact everything.
Oh, this is
in
why.
all
Okay, I've been
markets.
wondering. Now I have the answer.
Dollar yen is an important one, obviously, because that's the fuel. That's the liquidity trade that can influence everything from fixed income to stocks. We're watching it very closely today. What you see is weaker dollar, stronger yen. That is what Japan wants to see and what they stepped into the market and intervened to do. What was so monumental about what happened is that the U.S. joined, and the U.S., along with Japan, both stepped into the market to basically fight the speculators that have made the yen super weak. It got so weak. It was almost at 164.
And this
weakest
was when
level since
Friday
1986.
afternoon,
Friday.
we think, yeah.
They confirmed that
Right.
it happened on Friday, both the Japanese finance
Love that.
ministry
Look at that.
and the U.S. Treasury. This pick is so gold. It's
That is
Reuters
just-
captured this at the
There's no way Reuters captured this like in a, by the way, in video almost 204. Wow, she's moving. There's no way that Robin back above 90. There's no way this happened just for the sake of it happening. And look at the picture itself. The picture itself looks like a professional. It's one of those things where I'm sure Besant made sure it was okay for this to get leaked because they want people to know that they're intervening with the yen to stop it from weakening as much as it is.
Camp David cabinet meeting. This is Secretary Besant on his to-do list. Buy Japanese
He
yen.
actually writes to do.
Yes.
Yeah. I
Buy,
like that.
but what's fascinating here, David, is that
Yeah.
the U.S. and the Treasury has really had a very much of a hands-off approach when it comes to intervening in the markets and treasuries. We have a Treasury Secretary who traded currencies and made billions of dollars
On the
in
yen, I
selling the
think,
Japanese
yeah.
yen. So this is a guy that understands the markets. And I think the other really important takeaway, and maybe why you're seeing pressure on yields today, is that the New York Fed, which executes the currency trade, this isn't like taxpayers, so don't worry about it. They actually bought yen and sold euros, and I think that's a statement. Also, the Japanese made it clear that they used a facility. They did not sell treasuries, which
Right.
is what they would normally have to do
Well, that
to
is
buy
that
the
part
yen.
of the concern about the weaker yen here. In
Correct.
Terms of
So that's why the
treasuries.
U.S. has a big interest.
Not to mention what is a very large commitment from the Japanese as part of the trade deal to spend money here as well.
Exactly what I was going to go into. But look, here's how much Japan owns of U.S. treasuries. They're the top foreign holder now of treasuries.
Yeah,
because
well,
China's been
out of the
trimming.
market. Yeah.
Right. So they own a lot of treasuries. If they have to keep intervening, that's a concern for the U.S. because it means they sell those to buy yen. They did
Cost of
not do that
capital
this
goes up.
time.
Right.
But we know this is an administration that is serious about not having high interest rates, right? They've said it before. Besant has said it before at the outset. And so I think it's a very strong signal to the market that they're going to do something about it. They're going to intervene and make sure that we don't see, skyrocketing treasury yields and the weaker Japanese yen. And then the other takeaway is that it is a gesture of friendship for the U.S. And Japan. And President Trump said as much when he was asked about it. I think we do have that soundbite.
We have a good relationship with Japan. We're very strong, very, very strong financially. They are, they have a weakening yen, and they wanted a little bit of help. And we're always there for Japan. Japan's been very good to us.
They have been very good to us. If you look at direct investment into the U.S., Japan, I mean, it has been
Without a
skyrocketing.
doubt. And
They're
we've been good to the Argentinians as well. That's the other where we also intervened.
very
earlier in the
interesting
Trump
that the
administration.
geopolitical relationships and friendships in this administration, yes, we put our money where our mouth is when it
Right.
comes to those friendships.
So-
And you also mentioned the investment. Remember, Japan said it was going to invest, committed $550 billion into the U.S. When it has a very weak yen against the dollar, that makes it much more expensive and harder for them to do. So the U.S. also, this serves us because it helps them to continue to pour money into our country.
So it may not be the last time we see them do this.
Both finance minister of Japan and Treasury Secretary said we will not hesitate to do more, and that's a strong signal because typically what happens in currency this is the biggest, deepest market, most traded market in the world. Trillions of dollars trade every single day.
And again, the reason for those trillions of dollars is because people short the yen, they borrow in yen, which is at a very low interest rate, and then they buy U.S. tech stocks, right? So the yen weakening or strengthening really affects, that was the whole yen carry trade back in August of 2024, which is why, Trump and Besant are getting involved right here. But because they got involved, by the way, S&P almost 754, NVIDIA almost 205, you're starting to see tech stocks really like what they did over the weekend.
when Japan intervenes, and it's done so a number of times, the market fights back and it goes the other way. The U.S., I think that saying that they're going to do more, the U.S. involvement sends a much stronger signal, but it is not guaranteed, David, that it will work. And that's why this is so important, and we have to watch this. It's also, I sort of alluded to the carry trade. It's really important for that too. Usually you have weekend because most investors, they go for higher yielding currencies, right? And then they borrow and they fund it in the weaker, in the yen and the lower yielding currencies. And then that is a huge liquidity trade, and it makes stocks go up. And so that's why it's so important, I think, for if you're wondering at home, like, why do I care about the Japanese yen? It does really impact all corners of the market.
Right.
And Vita, she's waking up from the dead. Look at that go. 198 to 205. That was the number that at least I was looking for. I felt that would be a reasonable move given what we're seeing right here. SoFi above 17. I mean, if we could actually close on some of these levels and hold it. Robinhood back above 90. Kind of needed that to happen. Expected that to happen. AMD still struggling a bit, but not as much as it was before. 450 to 471. That one looks like it's about to flip green as well. Palantir 125. That's up 2%. Amazon looks like it's going to kind of normalize this 285 level. If we actually get a 290 breakout, that would be pretty massive. But if we can at least hold the 280s, that would be it. Rocket Lab, that's up 4%. SpaceX even is green today. I mean, the market is so green that SpaceX, which has $116 billion worth of shares that are going to be unlocked in 3 days, is up 2% today. I mean, that's how green we are across the board. D-Wave, your quantum names are up 8%. ARM still down 3. It was down 7. Cheesecake Factory, this one's had a massive move. That's up 2% above 100. Corning, that's up 2%. ASTS, that's up 5.5%. Bloom Energy, are we green there? We are green there, 215. I mean, a lot of your high beta names have started to wake up, and Microsoft looks like it really has a date with 500. Definitely don't see Microsoft going below 400 again, unless the broader S&P takes a hit. So it would be nice to at least have that normalize at somewhat of a level. And then Meta right here at 520, I guess, was a joke. And you're seeing this at least come back up into the 600s. Why is Broadcom still down? It's a good question. Broadcom on their earnings, the one thing they did not raise guidance, which it's such a stupid reason for why it got hit this hard. But I think if it was trading at 490, right? So it was trading at a very premium valuation, didn't raise guidance. Hot Tan wasn't as clear about some of the OpenAI revenue and things of the nature. And so the stock's been discounted since then. Overall, it was at 292 in March. So it's definitely had a rebound since then. But they're going to need an NVIDIA-like quarter to get into that $500-600 range and become a $3 trillion company. Because as of now, ASICs, as important as they are, I don't think is where the market necessarily feels all the value will be going to in semis. AMD right there. That's up 1.3% as well. Chad says, every time I hear you say high beta names, it makes me think of all the beta tweets you post. My tweets are not that beta, okay? My tweets have substance in them for the most part. Some of them are definitely a little beta. But that has started to hopefully not be as much. Dude, I remember I was going through some of my earlier tweets back in 2022. It's kind of crazy the shit I was tweeting, bro. Because you don't have an audience, so you're not really thinking about it. And you're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? No one knows who you are. No one knows your account. And so you see some of these tweets and you're like, did I really post that? Did I think that was smart to say? But things have evolved. Ondas, that's up 5. Ondas is kind of interesting, bro. The problem with Ondas right now is the sentiment around drones, and a lot of people thinking drones are just not as relevant or important given so many companies are producing them. But I feel like Ondas is doing a lot more, particularly because they're building a platform for drones, which is a bit more software oriented. Stock's also down 50%. So, I mean, if the worst of it is over, I know they've diluted a lot, but a lot of that dilution has led to accretive acquisitions. So it's one of those things I think to look into in the drone space. I think the broader macro background of 1.5 trillion of defense spend, is bullish for all these smaller companies that are out there. Wow, HIMS is also up 9%. That's getting green. Unusual Machines, yep. UMAC, that one's getting some love today. That's up 3.5. Ondas is 40% short. That is a fair argument. Get any drone sentiment that's bullish. Maybe that could have a little bit of a squeeze. Axon would be a big beneficiary with defense spend. That's up 7.2%. This was at the 300s at one point this year. This name holds. Now it was at like 900 last year. So obviously it's taken a big drawdown, but still green. Chad says Palantir earnings today, so I can't say anything about Palantir, but I choose to make fun of Amit instead. Chad, but you make fun of me on the days where there's not Palantir earnings. So it's not that different from you. It's just, I guess today you have no choice but to only make fun of me. Palantir right there, 124.70. So again, the street's expecting 1.8 billion on revenue, which if we do some math real quick, Palantir Q2 2025 revenue was 1.04. So if we look at what that's like, we're looking at about 80% growth rate is what the street's expecting, 79%. Again, I think if the company can come in, 85 to 90%, if not that triple digit. I mean, triple digits, 100%, that would be crazy. If we see that, I think the street would be very excited, along with their operating margins. Also, today's a really good day to report. You've got oil down. You've got freaking software momentum coming back. A little bit of some red candles on software, but that's kind of natural, as if everything is going to get lifted, you got to get the money from somewhere. And then you've got the market really asking themselves, once again, where is the value in AI? Is it in the model layer, which I think more people are. I mean, GPT lowered their prices again last Thursday on 5.6. And I was using a GPT and Claude over the weekend, and again, they continue to be amazing, but it's just like the token costs have to come down in order for me to keep using it if I don't want to go to use something else that's cheaper and just as good. So if the model value is not, or the value is not being accrued in the model layer, you have hardware and enterprise applications left. I mean, that's really it. We're not here, robots aren't a thing yet. So it's either the infrastructure to build AI or the applications that are making AI useful for companies, governments, organizations, and the enterprise. And that leaves you with the software companies and the hardware companies. And one of the best software companies that's out there is Palantir. So I think that's going to kind of be the messaging around the earnings. And ultimately, that's been the messaging this whole year. It's just up to the street to start to recognize that. Reddit 148, almost up to the 150 range, and then Shopify down a little bit here from the top. Spies at 754. Is Micron 800? Micron is 800. Okay, so for Micron to get to 800, you need some red candles on software, which is what we're seeing. Microsoft as well got a red candle, 491 to 486. But that's helping SPY get a full 1%. As that continues to be green. How's oil down? I don't get it. Trump said he's not going to attack. That's it. Simple enough. OPEC did say, by the way, they're increasing a ton of supply. So that also is a natural, they said that like 2 weeks ago. That has been a natural hedge against prices at least somewhat being stable and not, running up to the hundreds. But Trump says he's not going to attack. The market views that as potentially a ceasefire coming. And, maybe oil spikes back up throughout the week if that narrative changes. But again, these narratives change so quickly. All we can do is react to them, when they are changing. Do we have any news on CoreWeave? No, I do not see any news on CoreWeave. Still up 11% as that continues to be green. Seeing a lot of, 10 million of Bloom 270 calls just got bought for October 16th. And then about 1 million of Core Scientific $25 strike for September just got bought up. EchoStar's Hughes Network files for bankruptcy as $1.5 billion debt comes through. EchoStar is interesting because these guys own, if I'm not wrong, a bit of SpaceX, right? Well, yeah, they should. I mean, that's part of the reason why it got the love that it got a while ago. Stock's up today. So we're seeing EchoStars get some love. Hughes presented permission to operate uninterrupted and said its near-term liquidity. File for chapter. So this is not the entire company. This is part of the company that's filing for bankruptcy, which is why the stock's actually up, because the market, yeah, Dish Network is not going bankrupt from what I'm reading right here. Its filing will not affect EchoStar, Dish TV, Sling TV, or Boost Mobile. Dude, does anyone here have a Dish like on their house? Like I sometimes drive around and still see those, and like, I don't know, I feel like it's such old technology, but like it's still a thing where people, well, cable TV in general is dying out, but seeing dishes on houses, I feel like have, it's gone down dramatically. But this bankruptcy won't seem to be affecting them. Only for international TV. Yeah, I remember in like 2010, it'd be like on every house you would have a dish. I don't think we ever got one. I think we had the one without the dish, but it used to be a big thing. Google right there, 368. That's up 3.5%. Yeah, like a satellite dish, exactly. In the 2010s, it was a big thing. AMD, did we flip green? Oh, we are very close to flipping green. Dude, what if July was the worst of it? What if August we get to actually get back to being a bit more bullish here? Now, again, maybe that's wishful thinking, but July was very ugly in a lot of areas. Is financials up today? XLF. Yeah, the financials are up. The healthcare names are up. UNH is up. I mean, let's look at the heat map. Let's see if that could be helping. Wow, what a green day. Dude, the only thing that's red are like a few semi-names. That's it. That is it, folks. Look at that. NVIDIA. Look at her go. Almost 207. Or sorry, almost 206. Close above 205 would be incredible. Yeah, some of the financials are down, or some of the drug discovery names are down. The semis are down, but everything else, energy obviously is down, but that's okay because they rallied a ton last week, which is not that bad. Memory down is kind of stupid. Yeah, but memory's also recovering. I mean, Micron was at 770. Now it's at 809, right? So you would imagine they kind of catch up here. I feel like crypto, that's the one that is taking the main hit. Does Epsilon have earnings this week? Because this one's been bouncing up and down between $4 and $6. And I feel like this earnings is going to be important for them. Chad said I was 15 and figured out how to hack the cards to reprogram them to get whatever TV I wanted. You know, I used to be afraid of taking the card out of the box, like on the cable thing, because my mom told me like if you take the card out of the box, it'll like mess up the whole TV. So I always was so afraid of like taking out that card, because apparently that's what we used the card. We didn't have the dish, we had the card. I didn't know you could hack the cards, but I guess you could. But yeah, it was just like we have so much different technology today that allows us to access content versus what we used to do for cable TV. NVIDIA really moving forward, and so is S&P. 754, almost 755 right here. So is on Wednesday, okay. Dude, Wednesday's going to be crazy, guys. So Wednesday after the bell, today we have Palantir. Tomorrow we have AMD. Wednesday we have SoundHound, SanDisk, Mercado Libre, Western Digital, SMR, AppLovin, IONQ, Duolingo, Axon, Elf, DoorDash, Figma, Block, Symbotic, eBay, HubSpot, Etsy, Redwire, Appcelera, Sunrun, Viavi, Dave, Bumble, Chime. Like Wednesday's gonna be ridiculous, dude. You guys are gonna be looking at me become a madman trying to get all these numbers for earnings. But Wednesday's gonna be wild. Yes, grab us today. It's probably at 8 p.m. because 8 a.m. Singapore time. It'll be later in the day. Microsoft 485. As that continues to go green. Burry is getting hit today. So Burry did go short Micron, the Qs, and NVIDIA again on Friday or Thursday because he said it was a dead cat bounce. I mean, I don't know, man. These names have taken such a big hit already. I was actually shocked that he doubled down. I thought he would have closed it and been like, all right, I shorted Micron at 1,000. It went to 700. That's a good short. But he doubled down. So his argument is that Micron should be back into the 500-600s. Maybe, but at some point, yes, you can acknowledge it's cyclical and there's risks and all this stuff, but the earnings multiple just gets really, really dumb at some point. Nebius 206. As that continues to break out. Amcor, yes, this also. Wow, Amcor is starting to go a little green, but it's still below 50. I thought it'd be above 50. This one fell from $90 2 weeks ago. This has some recovery for it. There's no news on NVIDIA, nothing that I see. But NVIDIA in general should be green if everything else is going green. White House to host AI companies on Tuesday to review an AI framework. As per the information that just came out, Trump administration invited staffers from OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic to the White House on Tuesday. Okay, so this is probably going into the open source versus closed models debate. There's a bunch of reports over the weekend that OpenAI and Anthropic are lobbying pretty aggressively to not ban open source, but effectively not have open source be the de facto model that is welcome in the US. And there is a world where the Trump administration might seriously listen to that because, from their perspective, it's oh, China's distilling us and they're competing with us, yada, yada. Obviously, you can't close off technology in and of itself, and it would be a big blow to a lot of the open source revolution. So we're going to have to see how the Trump administration thinks of this and who ends up actually lobbying them to get something done. AMD very close to being green right here. But you do have, you have people like David Sachs that are pretty big on the board for open source. And I would imagine people like him are being consulted by the administration on what exactly needs to be done here. But ultimately, Trump and the Cent will have to decide what they think about these Chinese models. Nebius almost 207, Micron almost 810. Hut 8 does have earnings tomorrow as well. I mean, all your neoclouds getting some love. Is onsemi today? Today is Palantir, Grab, Snapchat. Oh yeah, we do have onsemi. Okay, so on the earnings, we're only going to be covering Palantir because it's a Palantir stream. And Grab doesn't even report for another 4 hours after Palantir, and then On and Snapchat. I don't know how many people care about those, but outside of Palantir, there's nothing else there's Voyager, Whirlpool. Yeah, but really it's going to be Palantir. And I think this will be good because if Palantir can crush earnings, that means the other software companies probably are going to be seen in a better light. Arnie and Amir should be joining me. Maybe Matt, but Arnie and Amir should be joining. Bloom 220. Bloom got to 160 last week on earnings. As that one continues to kind of defy most of those expectations. Again, there's been a lot of short reports written on Bloom. Seems like the sell-off mainly was due to a lot of the liquidation. Leo owned a lot of Bloom. It was $3-4 billion worth of it. So obviously his position got margin called pretty aggressively. Nebius 208. Look at that 9% day for Nebius and CoreWeave, to be honest. So both of them getting a very nice increase. Where's Oscar? Slightly down. But Oscar's outperformed a lot of different names this year. Do you think ServiceNow can pump if Palantir does well? I think all the software names should be able to get some level of exuberance if Palantir really crushes it. Now, the difference is all the other software names are not growing like Palantir, but the general sentiment around SaaS, I mean, Microsoft potentially, you need companies to prove Again, I don't think the market is dumb enough to keep thinking that software is actually dead because of Anthropic. I think we are stuck in this long semi-short software trade, which we know for a fact was happening because Leopold, which is one of the biggest AI hedge funds, was literally shorting the software names, which means all the people that were following him were doing the exact same thing. Like, it has never been about Anthropic killing Palantir. It's always been about you needed a short, and there's been financial engineering to kind of help the trade happen. So if that trade unwinds, I think the software names are due for a big rebound because a lot of them don't deserve to be at these levels, and they don't need to be arbitrarily shorted by by the fear of a company that is creating a commodity, which is an LLM, that when they go public, I mean, and you look at their numbers, I don't think their numbers are going to be that amazing. Like, yes, ARR growth is good, but like that can't continue in perpetuity, especially if you don't have a new thing that forces the consumption of tokens. Like, we already have agents that are out there. What's the next thing after agents that's going to force all this token consumption and do it in a profitable way when you have all these local models that can, do it for 1/10 of the cost? So it's like, Anthropic's not even scary anymore. Like, remember in April, Anthropic was like scary, and they were like, oh, are they gonna, like, Anthropic's a joke now. They're important, they're relevant, but scared of Anthropic, scared of Dario for his model that at the end of the day is, I mean, Kimi K3 is as good as Fable 5 in front-end design. We're supposed to be afraid of Anthropic? For what? Like, there's nothing to be afraid about. For what? For being a $1 trillion company that's not profitable? I mean, like, come on. So I think the market will be easily impressed by the software names once the models go public, but it might hurt the model companies. And that's okay, because at some point, value needs to shift. Zeta, is that making a move right here? Zeta 2244, that's up a little bit. What other macro stuff do we have? So we had the best PMI and ISM services we had in 4 years. That was green. The Microns and the Sandists are going the opposite direction of the Kospis of the world. So you're seeing the memory names actually get some love in the face of the South Korean memory names going red. You think Palantir earnings drops the semis? I don't know, dude. Maybe if Palantir pumps and software pumps, the semis get hit. But I think the days of that swinging back and forth of the trade are eventually going to come to an end. I don't think the entire rest of the year is going to be one goes up, the other has to go down. At least I'm hoping. We got Hassett live talking about GDP and some of the numbers from last week. Let's see what he had to say as well.
Is going to benefit from all of those new factories and new machines.
You're a NEC director. Do you ever talk to the Secretary of War or what? I mean, so much depends on what happens in Iran right now. Kevin, is that just not in your sphere? Do you worry about things? I mean, it affects oil prices. The president said to me, I definitely don't want. My biggest fear is to be Herbert Hoover. I don't want the world to get bogged down in a forever war where all the work we've done on the economy side
is minimized globally. And so you've seen that we've done that. We waived the Jones Act, and now there's like shipping in the U.S. is 4 times what it was before the war because we've got foreign vessels moving domestic fuel around within the U.S. instead of from abroad. Remember, the Asian refineries said we can't ship stuff to the U.S. anymore because of this conflict. And then what we did is we sent it from the Gulf of America instead. We've got something like $100 billion worth of sales of fossil fuels, which are now Americans buying from Americans because we waived the Jones Act. That's the kind of thing that we've done to minimize the price effect for Americans, and we'll continue to do so if necessary. But no, we don't make decisions about what's going to happen in the war.
What about the other Kevin? How do you think he's doing? You think he should have raised rates, or do you think he should be giving? I think we should have a Fed meeting every week, but that's just me. and make it a 2-day meeting and have it every week and have them talk. Do we need more or less spoon feeding about what the Fed's going to do?
Well, the problem is that our good friend Ben Bernanke came in and said that the Fed needs to be more transparent. And then they started putting up their dots and all these other things to tell us what they were thinking. And then they were so wrong that it actually increased uncertainty because, wait a minute, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'd rather not be transparent if they don't know what they're doing. And I think that what's happened is that all the many, many voices in the Fed, including people that don't know what they're doing, have created this cacophony of confusion. And that, Kevin Warsh has come in and he's fixing it. He's fixing it, and he's taking control. He's established these outside task force to look at the models that have been so wrong, and he's really moving things in a positive direction. And so we support the independence of the Fed. We'll let him decide on whether the data make him want to move interest rates this way or that. But we think that the positive momentum that he's created at the Fed is really impressive.
Kevin,
All right, you've got the White House being supportive right there of the Fed. Trump hasn't commented on Warsh in a while, but you've got the NEC director, Kevin Hassett, basically saying that they are fans of what he's doing with these new task forces to try to figure out what is the ultimate source of truth. Micron is about to go green. Pretty epic recovery from the lows of this morning. NVIDIA took a very small little bump on its way up to 206, but it looks like it's vehemently holding the 200s now. Software names getting some red candles because you need to make some room for the semis here, but I still think they can both end out green today. Rivian's up a little bit. GE Vernova, that is up as well. Nebius and CoreWeave, massive moves as well here that we're seeing today. BMNR is up a little as Bitcoin also kind of joining the part. Actually, it's about an $800 move on Bitcoin. Let's see if this can break through 64 potentially. DRAM as well. DRAM has now sold a ton of Samsung, and they bought CXMT. So officially, you have exposure to the Chinese memory companies in DRAM. And again, CXMT is getting a freaking 30x multiple, whereas the American names are getting like less than 12 times. But they are getting some love. Do you like Rocket Lab here? So yes, but the problem is I kind of still think Rocket Lab is stuck in SpaceX's algo. So I just think it's a little tough short term to buy Rocket Lab, expecting like a bounce back to 80, 90. I think it very well could happen, but I mean, if SpaceX actually goes below 100. And the thing is, like, you can't say the ASTS, Lunar, Rocket Lab, Redwire, they're disconnected from SpaceX because they all topped with SpaceX, you know? So I would imagine that until they diverge away, you can't easily say that you're not effectively long SpaceX if you're long Rocket Lab just via the short-term movement of the algos. Long-term, I think they will diverge. Having said that, Rocket Lab is still kind of expensive at $40 billion. And I've been saying Rocket Lab's expensive all year, but, you know, it went below 60 last week, got a bounce, bought it in March below 60, got a bounce. Like below that 60 range, 57, 58 is where it tends to say enough is enough. And so, you know, paying $8 above 60, $68, I don't think is a horrible buy here. But market shifts, we get high beta come down. Rocket Lab has a high beta multiple, right? Tesla has a high beta multiple. It's just, I think we're all hoping in August we don't have to see the high beta names get destroyed again, because in July, you know, they've already taken that hit. But I'm very curious about the SpaceX unlock, dude. Like, is there enough liquidity out there for people to just buy? The way people buy the SpaceX unlock and give liquidity to all the people that have been, you know, waiting to sell for 10 years is if SpaceX announces like some massive catalyst, you know, something where people are like, screw it, it's already down 50% from the highs, I'm buying the dip. And that gives the opportunity for people who are exiting to get out. I don't know what that catalyst could be. I feel like they would have to sign another data center lease, and it would have to be a really big one. But, you know, they already got the biggest one with Anthropic and Google. SanDisk, that's up 4% now on the day. SPY 755 as that one continues making its way back to all-time highs, or at least trying to. Okay, NVIDIA, there she goes. Let's see. Let me check resistance at 207. This is a much-needed move on this name And the reason, again, NVIDIA needs to be moving is because you can't have Amazon, Google, Microsoft going up, adding hundreds of billions of market cap when all the money they're spending, a lot of it is going into these GB300s and Vera Rubins at way better margins than the Max 7s themselves. So you would imagine NVIDIA should not be below 200 here. 207 has 40,000 shares. That's nothing. I mean, there's not a lot of resistance stopping her from running here. Is the dollar going down? That is a great question. The dollar is down, which makes sense because the Fed's, or not the Fed, but the Treasury is intervening with the yen. Why is gold down? That's also a good question. My gut would tell me, I'm curious what other people are saying. Remember when gold and silver were like the FOMO trades of the year? I mean, silver was pushing 120, dude. Gold was like almost 6,000. Like, these trades were there for a month. And then they just, once price action goes against you, like all the excitement about the trade is over. I think gold could be down simply because people are buying stocks. And if people are a bit more risk on, although gold is theoretically a risk on trade, it's not as risk on as a Nebius that can go up 10% in a day, right? I mean, it is kind of crazy. I think we've normalized seeing a Nebius of 9.5%. People would be happy in a year if they could get 9.5%. And Nebius just did it in 30 minutes. Having said that, the downside is also they could lose 9% in a day. They could lose 50% in a month, right? But it is kind of crazy, like when you see these moves on individual names and you're just like, oh yeah. When in reality, 9%, like 9% on gold would be crazy. And that it went up like 30% in January. But a lot of these individual moves are after, the downside, where it also hurt. Reddit almost 150. I expect Reddit, if the market is somewhat coherent about how they think of these earnings, to get into that 170, 180 range. But they've got to address the AI licensing deal, I think, to kind of change that. TSM just flipped green as well. That's also important. TSM was at 480 at the top, fell to 368. It's now at 403. And what do you think if oil drops into the 40s and 30s for the next 20 years? Because I think that's what will happen. I don't know if it can go that low because ultimately these oil companies still have to make a profit. And at some point, the cost of drilling is not worth it if the barrels are trading that cheaply. But it goes back to like this Elon Musk abundance thesis where, money doesn't matter and there's so many goods and services. And as a result of so many goods and services being there, you kind of don't care about the price of oil because, it's in abundance given how much deflation we're effectively going to have, which obviously from a macro political perspective would affect all commodity pricing. I kind of don't know how that world looks like, but this is what Elon said last week about money not mattering.
On how then you make money? Because in the end, people are buying your shares because they expect you to make money. Do you sell
I'll make another
robots?
prediction. Money won't matter in 2036.
You're sure that the people who bought your shares think that money won't matter in 2036?
Well, what do you want money for? You want money for goods and services, right? You want money for obviously food, housing, transport, entertainment. Well, if that is so abundant that there's more, that the robots and AI are providing more goods and services than any human could possibly consume, what do you need money for in that case?
But you're on how then you make money? Because in the end, people are buying your
I mean, dude, I don't know. 2036 is 10 years away. I don't know if, oil completely or money completely becomes worthless because then, oil, like how do you measure oil if money doesn't matter? Like it has such cascading consequences that it's hard to imagine it. But that's what the richest man in the world thinks could potentially happen. By the way, speaking of the richest man in the world, do you guys know who is the richest man in the world? I'm curious if people know this. Don't look it up. Who is the richest man in the world for a few minutes The guy argues it was for a few days, but if you actually look deeper, it's a few minutes. During the dot-com bubble, who's the richest man in the world? How crazy did things get for this one person to be the richest man in the world during the dot-com bubble? It was not me. I was 3 years old during the dot-com bubble. It was not Larry Ellison. It was not Bezos. I see one person got it right. No one else knows. Well, 2 people got it right. Okay, there's like 3 or 4 people that got it right. Tanner is right. Masa-san, the owner or the CEO of the Vision Fund at SoftBank. SoftBank became a $200 billion company during the dot-com bubble. Masa-san's equity was worth $84 billion. And so for a few minutes during the peak in February of March, Bill Gates was worth less than Masa-san. Then that $200 billion market cap ended up going to $1 billion, and Masa-san's worth went from $86 billion to $600 million over the next 2 years. But there was a few minutes. He argues it was a few days, but if you look at the details, it was more like a few minutes where he actually was the richest man on earth. That's how crazy shit got back in the dot-com bubble. Or someone like him who didn't really produce any value. I mean, SoftBank, it wasn't like a tech company or anything. It was just allocating a bunch of capital, but they had so many bets on these tech companies that the thing went up so much. It got destroyed with the dot-com bubble. Now, granted, he made a really good investment in Alibaba, turned 20 million into 20 billion. So obviously he's had some massive wins. But the point is, just imagine some random CEO of some bank that's investing in tech companies right now becoming the richest man in the world, richer than Elon Musk. That's how crazy the dot-com bubble was versus what we're experiencing right now, especially compared to the multiples. Amazon 285, that's up 5. Google still up 4, as that continues to be green. No, I'm talking about the dot-com bubble, not during the railroad time. During the dot-com bubble, it was Masa-san. And I just couldn't believe he became that. 84 billion. I think his net worth is like 10 billion now, right? What is Masa-san? I thought it was Steve. His net worth today is his net worth is still 75 billion today. Due to a stake in ARM and SoftBank. Oh wow, so he's right back to where he was. 75 billion today is nothing. I mean, it's a measly 75 billion, dude. Elon's pushing 700. Bezos is at 300. We don't really care about 80 billion, but it took him 20 years and he's back. Nebius 212. 212 as that continues to go green. Yeah, it absolutely is a crazy comeback story. And look, he's had some hiccups along the way. WeWork wasn't the best one, but SoftBank's made some really freaking good investments. I think their OpenAI bet, I don't know, 40 billion in OpenAI. I'm a little skeptical. They can't sell it. They need OpenAI to become a $5-6 trillion company because they invested at basically 800 billion. So they're not going to sell it if it goes to $1 trillion. He's taking a real long-term bet on OpenAI. And as important as OpenAI and Anthropic are, I can't get past the idea that these frontier models eventually are not going to make any money. So there's going to have to be another way that they apply the models to make money. And again, even if you're using a mix of open source and frontier models in the enterprise, like Zuckerberg was saying on the call, that's still market share that's leaving OpenAI. So it's where is the actual profitability, long-term coming from? Oracle 137, Shopify at 117. No, he didn't invest 40 billion in WeWork. I think it was 4 billion. Was it 40 billion? How much did Masa-san invest in WeWork? I don't think it was 40. I think the valuation ended up getting to, they invested 16 billion. The valuation ended up getting to 40 before it collapsed. So they lost around 16. But it is what it is. That one didn't work out. They had a bunch of others that did. Micron 823. Okay, officially goes green. Officially goes green right here. That's embarrassing. I don't know if people survive with anything less than 100 billion. Yeah, it's like less than 100 billion. It's not enough to live. NVIDIA, she wants the breakout. Took a very small red candle to 205, right back to 206.30. Nebius moving with it. CoreWeave moving with it. Micron moving with it. DRAM just flipped green. SpaceX flipped green. The hyperscalers are seeing some red candles because it's inevitable for the semis to get some love here, but it looks like everything might start participating. I mean, what's red? Exxon's red because of energy. Seagate's, well, Seagate should flip green, but they had earnings last week. They're up a lot from the earnings. Airbnb's flat. Circle's down 4 in crypto. Qs are trying to go reclaim the EMAs. That is correct. Getting above 700 will really help. Micron almost 830. AMD just flipped green, 485. All these charts above their VWAPs. You have the 5 EMA crossing the 9 EMA on pretty much every semiconductor name right now. You're seeing a lot of bullish momentum. Tesla, 315 was the level it needed to break, and it's well above that. AEHR, that's up 10. 10 years down a little, not a lot, but a little, which still helps. 4.684, Redwire's up. Who knows, guys? Maybe this is a fun start to August. Maybe this is a fun start to August. Someone just posted a screenshot of SpaceX down 50%, and the comment was, "This is going to be an insane opportunity in retrospect." Elon Musk responded, "I think so." Okay, so Elon continuing to say this will be a good opportunity. Again, their earnings are going to have to be really important because everyone's, down on shares right now. What do you think AMD price will be after earnings? Or what do we think on AMD, guys? Pump or dump? I mean, if we're getting a better sentiment move right now, I feel like AMD pumps. I just don't know, man. There's still, Intel had a great earnings, but again, Intel's multiple just like, it was too much. It's still down from 114 after there. It was just it got too much for the street to reconcile. Like if you look at Intel's earnings without the multiple, or without the, price to earnings the street has to put on it, Intel should be up a lot from earnings. Like they absolutely destroyed it. AMD, I think, will do the same, but I just wonder if the street's going to be happy. 600 gives you $1 trillion. So maybe the street just says, screw it, we're taking it to $1 trillion. And we'll figure it out from there. But you have a lot of the space names as well moving here. Let's see what other macro updates we have. So we looked at some of the Bernstein reports. Oh, Goldman said we should be worried about the Fed communication shift. The bank argued Kevin Warsh's proposal to give markets less insight into the Fed's reaction function would not improve policymaker feedback, but could instead delay monetary policy and create unnecessary volatility in financial markets. I do think the market overall is not happy with how Warsh has been acting, even if they're going to be annoyed with the level of volatility and being able to deal with the disclosures. I think the market ultimately wants to think of it. By the way, prediction markets are going crazy. For every $1,000 traded, Robinhood generates $23 in revenue from prediction markets. They do 13 cents for stocks, $1.47 for options, $2.50 for crypto, $23 for prediction markets. So prediction markets are here to stay. I think if we have a different political administration, maybe that changes, but these prediction market companies are growing like crazy. And this is also, we're getting into football season. I mean, like, you have the World Cup, now you get football, NBA, like Robinhood, the sustainability of that prediction market revenue, same thing for Kalshi, is probably going to be very strong going into the end of the year. And that could be important for them. Rocket Lab 69, you just got that love for Rocket Lab. Joanne says, what do you think about NVIDIA earnings? I think NVIDIA will undoubtedly crush. There's no way they can't. I think we'll probably see 95 to 100% year-over-year growth. What do we think NVIDIA is by end of year? Put your price target end of year for NVIDIA. I still think it's going to be tough for it to see 250, even though I think it deserves to. But I don't know. I'm more in that 230, 235 camp. Like, I think it could touch 250 and then it'll take a sell-off. And then, I don't think it's going above 275 or anything like that. But I think that 230 range which is a big move from here. 230 would be adding how much market cap? We're talking about effectively another $500 billion market cap by the end of the year, which again, I think should happen given their multiple, but whatever different headwinds we have to deal with as a market, NVIDIA is subject to that. I see a lot of people saying 240 to 250. Wouldn't mind that. I would not mind that. Tesla 321, SPY, high of the day. Where's Cerebras? That should be moving today as well, right? Yep, that's up 5%. That went below the IPO price for a while. Paul says if MI450 revenue starts to show in the guide, that stock will explode up. Server CPU demand will only carry it so far. I think that's a fair point. I think the server CPU story for AMD is also kind of priced in, given the multiple. Like, that was the story when it was at 350, and that story is now known. Same thing for Intel. That story is now known, right? Intel's still negative on the foundry revenue. If they went positive on that, I think Intel will be like 120 right now. But that part of the business is still, facing some pressure, even though they're navigating it correctly. So I do think AMD is going to need to have a little bit more of a GPU catalyst. Do you think Palantir pumps or dumps tonight? I don't know. I look, I think the number is going to be exceptional. So I think it will have a pump. Will it sustain that pump? I really don't know, guys. It's been 3 quarters in a row where they've had a pump, and then the next day it's just over with. Or in the after hours, it gets, last one they pumped to 150, then they got dumped. The one before that got to 165, then they got dumped. So I don't know. Maybe this is the one where things change. But I'm very confident the numbers will be exceptional. This is the only company actually really delivering enterprise value and growing. They're growing 80%, bro. Not a small base. It's not like they're going from 100 million to 300 million. Like, they're going from $1 billion to $2 billion. Like, in a year, they're going to be doing half of ServiceNow's revenue. And then in 2 years, they keep the growth rate up. They're going to be getting close to almost all of it. With the best margins in SaaS. It's quite incredible. So I think nothing is scaring me about the earnings. I just don't know how the stock will react. It's not one of those quarters where you're concerned that the numbers might not be good. Same thing for NVIDIA, right? The numbers are going to be great. The hyperscalers basically told you that. But will the street react? Qualcomm, if you're buying Qualcomm, you got to go out to 2029 because those earnings sucked, if we're being honest. Their investor day projections were really exciting, but Qualcomm has been the crappiest semiconductor name for the past 5 years for a reason. And if you look at the earnings, it once again shows there's not that much excitement or juice there. So this thing getting to 250 was peak toppiness. And I felt it at the time. It was okay, this is getting kind of dumb. But then, you can't argue with the market, and it makes you think the market's right. And then you realize, no, Qualcomm does not have the numbers to actually, just like Marvell, didn't have the numbers to command a 330 price. It made no sense. But 2029, their numbers look a lot better. And so if you look at it from that perspective and ignore the cell phone, smartphone, Snapdragon part of the business that's not growing that much because those sales might not have bottomed yet, that's where Qualcomm looks attractive. It's just right now, the market's not excited about it. Could Meta prediction markets be massive? I don't think Meta's actually going to try to get into prediction markets, honestly. I think Zucks is throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what could work. They have so many people, so I think that's why they're interested in it. I don't actually think they're going to get into gambling. If they do, I would be shocked. There's so many other things they could be going after versus prediction markets. But Meta does this a lot, dude. Meta went after Clubhouse, the audio app, 5 years ago. They never actually ended up making it into a thing. They go after a lot of categories. Many of those products don't really see the light. Amazon 284. Kramer just said to buy Amazon. So gonna have to hope Amazon survives this. But Kramer just said to buy it. Amazon right there, 284. Threads, Threads is doing great. but I don't think the street cares about Threads. That's the issue. Even though Threads is, I mean, I tried using it the other day. Threads is really, it's not my thing, but like they have, 500 million people every month using this thing. So people do like it. Yeah, dude, even Camilo's, now Camilo's nervous about Amazon. Oh, man. We're going to see if Amazon can get through this. SoFi is at least above 17, which is good. Nvidia back to 5 trillion. Market caps, Nvidia, Googs, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Those are your top 5. Amazon officially at 3 trillion. You know, the most important thing about Amazon as well is they just beat the numbers so decisively. And I think Camilla was right. The way they talked about CapEx was such an important distinction from the other Max 7s because they had the numbers. They just had to like hold the street's hand in realizing how strong the numbers actually were. And once they were able to do that, it was over. I was like, all right, we cannot deny the level that they're going at. Especially when Jassy says $1 trillion of AWS revenue a year. It's like, holy crap. And you know Jassy's going to execute towards that. Like, as long as the broader demand picture is intact. I mean, Amazon is the best chance of all the Max 7s to get to that $1 trillion per year. Yeah, Corey Van Nebbies did start red today. They opened down 5%. So the fact that they flipped green into the open here. I mean, again, is this dead cat bounce really like, it reminds me of Thursday last week, and then Friday we ended up seeing all the stuff go red. So tomorrow, if everything goes red from these levels again, you know, maybe you have that choppiness. But the biggest issue that caused all these names to fall, which was Leopold's fund, is out of the picture now. By the way, we read his letter on Friday that he sent to investors. The fund is still up 80% year to date. The problem is they're calculating that 80% by using their private stakes, and they have a massive stake in Anthropic, right? So if you invested in the past 3 months, you're not up 80%, you know, because you had to invest before they made a lot of those investments. So the question then becomes, is Anthropic going to be successful when it goes public? Because if it doesn't, that entire 80% gets hit pretty hard. Bloomberg headline, Palantir checks indicate a beat and raise after hours. Okay. I think we'll get the beat and raise. The question is by how much. And folks, if we see a 2 on that revenue handle, 2 billion, at some point, I think the street's going to have to be like, all right, it's Palantir. We can't keep ignoring it. So that'll be important after hours. Reddit back above 150. 135 to 150. Okay. Let's see now if we can get into the 155 ranges here. What is the new Robinhood Ventures Fund? They're coming out with a 3rd Ventures Fund. They're probably going to be investing in new private companies. They already have the flagship one with SpaceX, OpenAI, Canva, all that stuff. Wow, NVIDIA's really going for it. 207, 3 cents away. There it is. There it is. NVIDIA to me is kind of a check on the entire market's bullish sentiment. Like you need this one to participate at scale, and it's definitely doing that. But yeah, that new venture fund, I think, will just have stakes in other smaller companies. Let's see the stock draft. How are we doing there? Me, Jason, and Chris are still at the bottom. Yeah, it's still pretty ugly, dude. I was talking with, Jason did basis points over the weekend. So that'll be a fun episode. It'll be out later. Sam also did basis points. So we'll have Sam's episode come out tomorrow. It'll be fun. But we were talking about the stock draft. We top ticked the stock draft so hard. So hard. I mean, we did this draft like the week the semis we're topped. And it's one of those things that's just so funny because it's like, usually you do to do something annually, you have to start in January. We ended up starting in the middle of June. And in the middle of June, the market already tends to be a little wary of stuff. And then we just happened to do it when all the semis were going euphoric. So I don't know if some of those names get back to their all-time highs. I don't know if we get that euphoria, but hopefully we don't have to get them down to the lowest of levels. ISM was very bullish. Yes, ISM and PMI today were very strong. Yeah, it's Jason and Sam flew out to New York. They have some event they're going to today. So yesterday we got them in the studio, did some episodes, and they're fun. I think people will enjoy it. Pakistani Prime Minister or Foreign Minister and foreign Pakistan sources announced the Pakistani minister plans to visit Iran within the next 2 days. Okay. Maybe that's going to be somewhat good for negotiations. Intel still at 90. Paul says I'm driving to that event right now. Yeah, it should be a good event. Jason's going to be there from like 8 to 9 today. He's going to be completely busy. He came to the apartment yesterday. They landed at JFK at like 5 a.m. So he came to my apartment. We got to hang out yesterday before the podcast. But he's going to be at the event for the next 2 days and just going to be pretty busy the whole day at that event. That's why we can't have Technical Tuesday tomorrow. But it doesn't really matter because we have AMD earnings. So that'll be what we look at tomorrow. Robinhood back at 90. Back at 90. How much are we going to owe Pakistan after negotiations this time? Dude, they really wanted $10 billion for setting up negotiations that didn't even lead to anything. It was crazy. Nabby is 215, man. This is like feeling like Thursday. The magnitude of the move is not as big as Thursday last week, but it's kind of feeling like it. And this time you have the large caps participating, which makes me think it's way more real than Thursday. Because last Thursday, the hyperscalers really didn't pump. And now they're each getting 7 to 8% moves. I mean, these are massive moves that are essentially flipping all of them green year to date. Which is very, very nice to see. Amit, do you think someone who started their port in June is screwed for a year? I think if you started your port and went all in on the semis in June, yeah. I mean, like, not necessarily screwed, but like it's just going to take some time for those names to get back to those levels, right? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it happens super quick. Maybe it's a crazy V shape, but you know, some of those names are still down 40% from the highs. But directionally, as long as the market's not like AI is dead, that's why these names are dead. But the market's like, no, AI is not dead. There was just a massive level of leverage that we had to get out of the system. Then those names directionally are in the right thematic, even if, you know, the valuations got up there. Here's the update on Iran, by the way, as we're seeing this come in right now.
Both allies asked him not to because they've agreed on what the president says are the perimeters of a deal.
We're all set to go. But when the allies ask to call it off, you got to sort of say, well, let's see. And the reason they asked is I think there's a deal. There's a deal on Hormuz, and then there will be a deal on the nuclear, or you might call it the denuclearization of Iran.
Saying there that there is a deal on reopening the strait, that there will be a deal on Iran's nuclear program. The president also saying negotiations are set to begin this afternoon. And guys, if any of this sounds familiar, it should. The president has repeatedly said since the April ceasefire that he's had a deal with Iran, that Iran has agreed to various U.S. demands. But of course, we have not seen that materialize yet. And as for this time around, Iran's foreign ministry spokesperson saying this morning they are not currently negotiating with the United States and that their only negotiations are with Oman, focused on reaching an understanding on a route to ensure safe shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. But guys, the spokesperson went on to say that establishing a safe route does not mean they'll be reopening the strait, that it remains closed as long as U.S. aggression continues and the blockade remains in place. So essentially what this all means is we're still mostly at status quo here, and we're still waiting for further confirmation that talks will in fact take place this afternoon. Guys.
And talks are over what happens with the Strait of Hormuz. What about the whole nuclear issue?
Exactly. The verb tenses that the president was using there, I found very interesting because he's saying even with these perimeters of a deal that they are about the strait and that later there will be a deal for nuclear. So that's still where we are. We're still working on getting back to where things were before the war was launched. They're not yet, it appears, even discussing the issues that got us into the war in the first place.
Okay, Megan Casella, thank you. Here we go again. Coming up next, CEO of Hugging Face joins us after rogue OpenAI agent.
I mean, what do we think, guys? Do we think, let's do a poll. Do we think this war is actually getting closer to an end? Or is this just once again the nonsense we have to deal with? What do people think? Are we closer to the war ending? I'm going to be an optimist. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say enough is enough. And I'm honestly not even judging it based on pure optimism. I'm looking at that 10-year, and I think Trump's looking at the credit markets and saying, all right, it's time. Enough is enough. We can't keep doing this. Got the midterms coming up. I feel like it is finally time. But I could be wrong. It's just stocks are definitely acting like it's hopefully over as well. Google 370. Google has surpassed Apple as the most valuable company, or as the second most valuable company. And Nvidia is still at $5 trillion. Iran doesn't care about the 10-year, yeah, but the U.S. does, right? Look, here's the thing. If Iran knows that the U.S. is in a really messed up situation and they continue to want to attack, the only way that to cause more havoc and instability and all that stuff, the only way the U.S. gets them to the table is by the U.S. capitulating. So either the United States gives more sanction release or unfreezes their assets or whatever the U.S. has to do. The U.S. has to cry uncle effectively if Iran doesn't actually feel threatened by geopolitical conditions inside the United States. So the way Trump is going to frame it is as if Iran cried uncle and they capitulated. It's going to be a game of charades of both leaders trying to convince their countries that they're the ones who won the game. But the point is, if enough is enough, then maybe it's time. Because if the Iranians don't want to listen to any negotiation that doesn't lead to something that explicitly benefits them, and the U.S. knows that our 10-year, our credit markets cannot keep supporting a war, and the Iranians are fine with continuing to fight because they don't give a shit, right? Iran's inflation is Iran's like in hyperinflation. They don't care about anything. Then at some point, the United States is going to have to step up and assume responsibility and get this over with. It's just the public framing of that is going to have to be in a way that makes people think that we won. SpaceX up 3% and Rocket Lab up 6%. But Trump's also, putting on the tough guy hat where it's like, I'm going to bomb them every other day. And I think Iran loves that. Iran loves that he gets that aggressive because then that gives them the justification to fight back. And I think over the weekend, he finally realized we can't continue to be that aggressive because the market's just not going to be able to handle it. Shopify right there, that's up a little bit. And then Oracle slightly down, but still green from the lows. CoreWeave, wow, 14%, man. What a move today. What an absolute move you're seeing on this one. What do you think about Shopify? I think they're going to crush earnings. They grew GMV the fastest in 5 years at 32%. I think they have earnings this week on Wednesday. I think they'll be fine. I don't know how the stock's going to react, but it's down from 150. I would imagine that 130 range, 135 is not crazy. It was at 130 on Friday. But long term, it's Shopify's not that scary of a company to bet on. SoFi also 14 to 17.40. Pretty nice move from that earnings dump. I mean, pretty much everything, folks, is going green. Micron just went red by $1. Broadcom is almost green. This one was stuck all day. Nebius up 12.5. I mean, everything. Wix, that was down 10% last week. That one has flipped up. Hood's up. You got a bunch of these names that are making their move. Um, 2.4 million of Nebius 380 calls have been bought in the option flow. And that is for, wow, 380. That is for November 20th. November 20th. Dude, if Nebius actually gets back into the 300s, but I mean, dude, that would be crazy. If sentiment is there to get it up there. Bloom, that's up 7. Yeah, 380, 2.5 million. November 20th. Dude, if we actually get a real pump Santa Claus rally type of move into the end of the year, we're going to have to experience a little bit of pain before we get there. Maybe July was the pain. Maybe the pain still has to come, but we've definitely had 2 ugly drawdowns this year. One was in March. That was the whole market. And then one was mainly high beta in July. Do you think software is dissociated from semis? Not yet, but I think it's getting closer. But not yet. I think by the end of the year, it will be more apparent. AXTI, that's up 14%, another photonics play. But it's still, still, if Anthropic comes out with some new model or something and the street freaks out again, like it's still one of those things where I just think it would be dip buy. I mean, like every time Anthropic does some of this shit, buying the dip on software this year has worked out. Like the absolute lows, it's worked. It's just, they've still underperformed buying into strength on the semis, which is why people think the software names still have a lot more room to run. What did you guys say in the poll? 61% of you say no, we are not closer to the war ending. Netanyahu just now on Iran said, I think Trump's calculation is that he doesn't want to see a collapse of the global economy. He just said that in an interview. I'm curious what happened during that meeting because we don't have that many updates on what happened with Trump and Netanyahu. Trump just said it was a good meeting, which made a lot of the market think we were going to attack again. But Netanyahu right here saying is that Trump doesn't want to see a collapse of the global economy, which means seems like Trump is a bit more unlikely to attack. At least that's the vibe we're getting from him based on his comments last night. CrowdStrike's up, Palo Alto's up, Nabesis 215, getting that to 220 would be very nice to see. Meta getting a 6-point move. Cerebras up 5. And then NVIDIA almost 207. Did we get a taco? We got Trump saying he didn't want to attack. That was enough to get oil down. That's helping the market. Is Leopold going to be buying AI stocks again? I think he's done with the public. I mean, he said in his letter they still have a bunch of public positions, but they're just not applying leverage. So if they do buy, it's not going to be with the level of velocity they were buying a while ago. But, they still have some money in the public markets. That story just last week, just covering that live, dude, it was just unbelievable. Every little update. I mean, dude, by the way, you guys know, I think I mentioned this, but you know who he's getting married to? We know it's someone who worked at Anthropic, but it's not just someone who works at Anthropic. It's Dario's chief of staff. Like we're talking about someone who, like, this is the only direct report that Dario has. It's just her, Avital Balwit. He has one direct report, and it's who Leo got married to. Like, talk about having access to information, bro. You get home at night from a long day of work. Honey, when's the next model coming out? Like, it's just, I mean, like, And what? You're just getting married to the guy. You're just gonna say no. I can't tell you. It's confidential. Like, oh, she's like, it's coming out next month. He's like, all right, bet. Increasing the shorts on the software names today. Like he had access to just every last piece of information. It's just the leverage. The leverage got so high. 151 almost on Mr. Reddit. What if the wife was an investment? He was playing 4D chess. Dude, if the wife was an investment, it was an expensive investment because he got liquidated before the marriage. It's just crazy, bro. It's just that entire story. Absolutely crazy. And now he's got to listen to her every night saying, I told you to sell. Could you imagine if every night she was like, dude, sell, take your profits. You're up a lot. And imagine he would just look at her and be like, no, like, I'm a genius. Like, it's going to work out. Like, that would be kind of crazy if she was telling him to de-lever. She's like, look, I'm the chief of staff to Dario. I can tell things are a little iffy right now. Honestly, that open source rant that Karp went on that got the entire world to think about the models differently, that also was part of the process of the semis getting hit. Like, it was Micron earnings and then Karp kind of telling everybody open source is real and like there's no reason to be paying for all these models. And then you had Kimi K3 come out. Like, those three events happening together was the top. And, again, it might not be the long-term top. It might be a short-term top. But sentiment-wise, any investor could have realized, like, okay, it's getting ugly here. Like, we need to either have some protection or de-lever. And that's just not what he did. Jersey Mike's, that one is still up 4% from the IPO. And then Roblox, that up 3% as well. All right, guys, overall a good day. I mean, the main headlines here were oil coming down, and there's not really a semiconductor headline. It just feels like a more broader pump based on the hyperscalers doing what they need to do. We've got pound earnings after the bell, but the neo clouds loving it. Large caps are really loving it. Nebius and CoreWeave absolutely loving it. NVIDIA right there making a nice move. Software names not as high as they were in the morning, but still pretty green for the day. SanDisk up 3 after being down 5. Like, many of these names recovering from their intraday lows. HIM's up 9, even though they're getting sued from last week. So I think SpaceX, like, you're just seeing the algos buy up everything at this point, as it's one of those, hopefully, green days throughout the rest of the day. Yeah, Micron is kind of weird. I don't know why Micron is still down 1%. Micron's been acting kind of weird the whole week, to be honest. Like, it's been getting rejected at many key levels. So it is a little weird, but at least it's up from the lows. Do we have anything else? I don't see any other major headlines. Again, earnings today will be important. We'll be going through all those companies. Tomorrow is going to be a big one. This whole week, quite frankly. A lot of earnings. I would imagine a lot of repairment of portfolios in the past week has happened as the Max 7s have really made their move right here. Tesla, dude, it was below 300 last week. Almost 324. And it seems like the market is agreeing with a lot of what the hyperscaler said. TE, that's up today. That one took a pretty ugly hit last week as well. Micron's just not that sexy anymore. I do think the story of the memory names has been exposed and people know it. But the multiples obviously are still relatively attractive. Dell right there, that's up 2.8% as well. Seagate's down 5. That one's weird. So some of your memory names going the opposite of the rest of the semi-stack. But everything else still green. Do you think Palantir can do $2 billion in revenue this year? I don't know, man. I think there's a real shot they can. I don't want to get overly excited. They don't tend to beat by that wide of a margin. But if they do, and this would be the quarter And yeah, I think the street would be very happy about that. Let's hear from this Hugging Face CEO, and then we'll end it out on what happened with the OpenAI hack. Can give us some more clarity on that story from last week, and then we'll be done here for today.
It's preventable. Like, you have to remember that these agent systems are built by engineers, right? And engineers make mistakes, and I think this is what happened here. You can see that, you know, some mistakes were made that led to the agent system kind of like do things that weren't really planned by the engineers. Also, you want to monitor them better. You know, like you have to be able to detect on the attacker side such operations faster than what we've seen. And then ultimately, you want to prevent it as a system, for example, making sure that they stay illegal, right? That everyone understands that the cyber attack is a crime.
Oh boy, Trump tweeted, please let this not be bearish, dude. Okay, Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. Why is he starting off with the word of the day? What does that word even mean? Duplicitous. Being deceitful. Okay. Iranian leadership is unbelievably duplicitous. Let's put up SPY while I'm reading this. SPY's flat. They asked for a meeting. Some would say beg. Talks began with more scheduled in the immediate future. And then they say openly and proudly that they're not having any discussions, that nothing is being talked about, and they're only dealing with Oman. They then go to give their usual blather in saying the Strait of Hormuz will be operated powerfully by them when it is already completely controlled by the United States Navy and our blockade, or as some say, the United States walls of steel. Nothing gets through to Iran unless we want it to, and nothing will get through unless a deal or total surrender is accomplished. Whether Iran wants to admit it or not, we are in fact talking of a solution to a problem that they have caused for decades. It is very simple. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Okay, so this is one of those tweets where Trump is trying to reframe the media narrative, because we talked about early in the morning, Iran came out and said, we're not talking to the US, even though Trump last night explicitly said we're not going to attack them the hardest since World War II, because we've started talking to them. NVIDIA getting some red candles right there. But I think Trump is now upset that the media is running with this argument that Iran basically is accusing the US of lying. And I actually think Trump is right about this. I actually do think they're talking. It's just the IRGC doesn't want to make it seem like they're talking, because obviously that would give up some of their leverage. And so this is not necessarily a bearish tweet. It's more so Trump saying, look, the Iranians can say whatever they want, but they obviously know that we're talking. It is definitely different from his super, alpha macho tweets from last week, where he was saying, I don't care if we're talking or not, I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. Now he's like, no, we are talking. Like, they know we're talking. They might not say we're talking, but we are talking. It's him kind of admitting that, like, we want to negotiate. We are negotiating. Even if they say we're not, it is indeed happening, which is a full 180 from, I don't care what they say, I'm going to bomb the hell out of them. Which I actually think is bullish. And the reason it's bullish is because it's Trump capitulating. It's Trump effectively reading between the lines, saying, like, look, I want to get a deal. And at some point, he's going to have to give up enough leverage or give up enough frozen assets or enough sanctions relief or whatever the hell the Iranians want to get that deal to happen. And as long as the Iranians give him the appearance of saying that they've completely gotten rid of their nuclear weapons program and they're opening the Strait of Hormuz, I think that's going to be the deal, even if practically that might not be exactly what happens. But nonetheless, a tweet like this will spike up oil. Oil, yep, there you go, 78 to 79. And then it will give some red candles on the SPY. There's that red candle right there. Very small candle, still up 1% on the day. Nebius was at what, 215? Nebius 211 again. Micron. That Trump tweet took it down $15. But there you go, 830 to 804. The Trump tweet will do that. But I don't think this tweet is actually bearish. I don't actually think this tweet is bearish. I think literally, if you like read between the lines, Trump is saying he's upset that the Iranians are saying we're not talking, which means he's trying to tell the market we are talking. The gut reaction to the tweet is like bearish, because that's how the market always reacts. But I think intrinsically what it proves is that there is a conversation that's happening. Hopefully that conversation results in something positive. But nothing in this tweet is saying he's going to bomb the hell out of them or he's going to burn the power plants or anything. It's actually him admitting that he wants to have a conversation. So hopefully that's how the market corresponds with that as well. The tweet means it continues the war and there's no conversation. That is not what the tweet means. The tweet means that he's upset Iran keeps saying that they're not having a conversation. But they are having a conversation. Look at this. Whether Iran wants to admit it or not, we are in fact talking of a solution to a problem that they have caused for decades. Whether Iran wants to admit it or not, we are in fact talking of a solution. He's literally talking about a solution. His tweet is all about the solution. He's just upset that Iran doesn't want to acknowledge it, probably because his ego is hurt and probably because he doesn't like, how Iran's manipulating the media. And I think he's right. I think Iran is lying that they are talking. Now, maybe they don't have the upper hand in those conversations. Maybe Iran has more leverage here. I don't know, but it does feel like they're talking, and the tweet is implying that they're talking, which to me feels more bullish, but who knows? We're going to have to see what ends up happening. He's talking with himself. Oh, boy. We will find out. I think we'll find out pretty soon, man. I think in the next couple of days, if not next few weeks, but hopefully not next few months, this situation has to be brought on. Time will tell. Time will tell. We got a bunch of earnings this week. We need those earnings to do well. We need oil to keep coming down. We need some level of a ceasefire to be in place officially, and then we'll obviously have the markets react. By the way, the market's not even down on that news. Look at this. You're starting to get a bunch of those candles coming back. Micron just went up $5. Nebius, look at that. The $4 it lost, it just recovered 50% of that. I'm telling you, I don't think this tweet is bearish. I think this tweet is actually admitting that negotiations are happening. It's just the market's knee-jerk reaction is going to be to think that it's bad. All right, well, that is it for me, folks. Let's do word of the day. I will be back at 3:30 with the market close. We got a big one. We got a big one with Mr. Palantir. I think they will crush. We will see how the market reacts to it. I should be here with a bunch of OGs from the community. I'll see if I can get some more people on, but definitely Arnie and Amir should be here. And as long as we have a good results, then hopefully we can go higher. Grab is going to be at night, so Grab will not be after hours. They're in Singapore, so they're going to be at 8 p.m. So you're not going to get those at 4 p.m. But Palantir will be immediately after the bell. And then we're going to see those earnings. Word of the day. Okay. I don't know how to say this. Autopoiesis. The capacity of a system to continuously create, maintain, and renew itself from within. AMD's tomorrow, guys. AMD is not today. AMD is tomorrow. The strongest technology platforms exhibit autopoiesis. Every new user, developer, and product makes the ecosystem more capable of sustaining its own growth. I've never heard this word. Has anyone heard this word? Autopoiesis. I feel like I'm saying it right.
Autopoiesis.
Okay, roundabout. Roundabout, the capacity of a system to continuously create, maintain, and renew itself from within. We're going to see if this market can maintain its structure that it had before July. And hopefully we start at August on a much friendlier note. S&P 500, again, NVIDIA doing great today, back up to 207, S&P 500, 755, literally $2 away from all-time highs. And hoping we can keep that as we get towards the end of the day. All right, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all. I will see you guys 3:30 on the market close. Got Palantir earnings, and we will see where it goes from there. Obviously, I think this is like my 20th earnings covering Palantir, so it's going to be an exciting one. A lot more people on the journey than were there in 2022 when there was like 300 of us on these live streams covering Palantir, but this will be a big one, and I think we'll get some good numbers, and then hopefully the street reacts in a more positive way. All right, thank you, everybody. We'll see you guys in a few hours. Bye, everyone. Have a good one.